I will call to order the Transportation, Energy and Utilities Committee of the City Council at 4:05 and entertain a motion on our agenda time.
I would move the adoption of the meeting agenda as posted on Civic.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 It's unanimous. Next, we have adoption of two sets of minutes, the ones from our September 30th meeting and our.
Yes, I would move the adoption of both the sets of minutes, the 30th of September and the 20th of October.
Second.
Is there any discussion on that?
Let me just express my thanks at the use of the AI function and then the staff review of that and the little sidebar on there. I mean, it just will give people enough information to send us all scurrying to the video, but and give us an idea of what we've talked about. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I'll pass that along.
Okay, any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
that's unanimous as well. Next we have public forum, and I will note that I received a voicemail, Sharon Busher, a little while ago. She can't attend the meeting this evening, but she wanted the opportunity to provide comment after she listens to the meeting, and I have not responded to her, but we're gonna allow that. So I'll offer that to anybody else listening. After you hear our presentations and you have something you want to add to the meeting record. Send it. What? Oh, Sharon is online. And I don't know if Sharon wants to speak. If she does, she can use the raise hand function. Okay, good. Before I turn to Sharon though, we'll go to those here in the room. And we have Peter McGosland here.
Okay, so I haven't heard any of them hard of hearing. Are we in the public comment?
We're in
right
public
now?
comment now, yes.
Okay, I'm gonna be brief. So, Peter McCausland, for those of you in the room who weren't here in the late 70s and early 80s, I had a small outfit called Burlington Recycling Company, which picked up newspaper on every, in Burlington, once a month. I drove every street in Burlington. I sold to, 2 cellulose insulation manufacturers and 3 paper mills, Montreal, Plattsburgh, Vermont, and Mass. As everyone knows, in the mid 80s, everyone was recycling. So economics 101, markets crash. Harvard went from 40 to 0. Consolidated fiber says, call me back in a year. So I had to close up and work for Burlington Paper Stock Company. Burlington Waste and Metal Company for another year, and then I went into painting. So I just talked with the gentleman next to Spence.
Yes, Chapin Spencer.
Chapin, and Burlington's been doing the municipal recycling for 40 years, and all of a sudden we want to there's this notion to privatize, and because of various reasons, difficulty to hire. The police department, electric department, and fire department all need hires. They don't want to privatize. There's room for trucks. We have a lot of room to trucks. Injuries is a problem, I get it, and maintenance in turn. So I think more effort is looked into the operation that we have now before we enter a 7-year contract, because no one wanted to do a 3 to 5 year contract. So I'm gonna leave it at that, if I may. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Is there anybody else in the room? One last offer for public comment. Seeing none, I'll go to those online. I know Sharon has her hand raised. If there's anybody else joining remotely, you can use the raise hand function to indicate that you want to speak in public forum. Go ahead, Sharon.
Oh, okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm working. This has been a crazy week. I have 2 comments. First of all, when I looked at the agenda, there were no attachments to the recycling item. So, and I have been working and I now noticed attachments. So I don't know what I guess the options are, to keep it in-house or to go with, I guess there's been only one response, but I don't know that. So I'm not prepared to speak in advance of the presentation, and I apologize for that. But my other point is that this is a very important item for everyone in Burlington. And I think that lots of people have opinions about it and concerns. And I applaud you all for being crazy like me and working 2 days before Thanksgiving. But I have concerns about the timing if of meetings that occur so close to holidays, and how that sometimes really prevents people who would normally participate from participating. And so that's one thing that I wanted to say. And I know that you all have timelines and you've got to get it done. And so I don't know how you balance it. Well, I do know how you balance it, but I'm hoping that this conversation will have an opportunity for the public to weigh in again. The other thing is, when I was looking at in advance for your next potential meeting, I don't know if this date is really true, but it's December 23rd. Not a great date either, 2 days before Christmas. So I have a lot of concerns about timing of really important items. And this is one item where, for the counselors that are part of this committee, I really feel that the whole council, I think these are the kinds of topics that almost need the entire council to have really special meetings dedicated to these items, because they really do impact and change the direction that the city's going in. And I think that every ward and every citizen cares about items like the recycling and what we do with our recycling program. So those are my comments. They aren't specific, as I said. I will be leaving, but I'm going to tune back in hopefully at towards the, well, halfway through your meeting, when this is potentially going to be slated. I need to educate myself and hear what the committee has to say and what the department has to say. So thanks again for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Sharon. I'm glad you could be here for at least a brief comment this afternoon. And like I said earlier, I understand this is we have a set of 3 topics, and people may have strong opinions or comments to add. And if you're not here today because it's close to the holiday and we're meeting at an odd time, please feel free to provide those comments, and we will attach them to the meeting agenda or the meeting record. You can send them to me, mbarlow@burlingtonpt.gov, and I'll make sure they get added. And so with that, is there anybody else who wants to speak at public forum?
Yes. You just lowered his hand. Oh, I got Pike Porter. I will allow you to speak now. If anyone else wants to speak in public forum, could you also raise your hand and join the queue?
Go ahead, Mike.
Hi, thanks for taking my questions and comments. Well, let's start with Velerity. I sent you earlier some data from the EPA Clean Air Market Program that has different annual CO2 amounts than what Velerity's supplying in its slide deck. So I was hoping that maybe someone could address the discrepancy there. The Velerity slide deck was only posted, I think, a half hour ago, so I haven't had time to really look at it in detail. But I have some questions and concerns. One being that they chose a single month, January, to compare rates. It is true that McNeil almost breaks even in December and January, but just choosing a single month of January doesn't really represent the full cost or the full cost to ratepayers over the entirety of the year. They could have chosen the month of April or August when McNeil has a 0 capacity factor. But then on top of that, it seems like they suggest that the only alternative is buying power on the spot market or the day ahead market, rather than entering into some kind of power purchase agreement. So they have something that says instead of generating power, BED would have to buy power from the wholesale market, well above McNeil's implied offer price. And then because ISO New England costs are primarily fuel, they would have to purchase RECs to green up the power. As far as I know, BED is already buying RECs to cover McNeil because it sells the McNeil RECs and it has to cover that. So I don't see that there's an additional cost there. So maybe Velerity can explain why we would have to buy RECs twice. And then maybe on another slide, they do talk about a hydropower purchase agreement, and ask them if a long-term power purchase agreement would avoid the concerns of buying on the wholesale market for the month of January. So those are my questions, comments regarding the Velerity report. I probably have more after today's presentation and after reading it in more detail. But I'd like to make some comments on the letter I submitted as a public comment, letter that Connecticut attorneys filed to Connecticut DEEP, Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, on behalf of BED. I thought it should come to your attention because it demonstrates again just the lies by omission that BED is continuing. So we have heard from BED staff that BED may still be, McNeil may still be eligible for Connecticut RECs because it had a contract at the time that was required. There has been nothing from BED staff to mention either at this committee or at the Burlington Electric Commission that one of the other criteria is that it has to meet Connecticut's solid waste management plans. So this letter that I submitted does indicate that BED is aware that it needs to meet solid waste management plans. It provides some unfounded, unsubstantiated, kind of outlandish statements that, you know, the Connecticut loggers have felt inclined to try and get wood up to McNeil. The letter that was sent also references two analyses that don't count stack emissions. We've heard in the past from BED staff that we should be looking at the wood combustion on a life cycle basis. So we hear that here, but then everywhere else, they submit these analyses that do nothing of the sort. All they do is consider the wood burned there as carbon neutral. Again, it's a lie by omission. It's saying, oh, look, we're 74% better than natural gas if you don't count the stack emissions, which of course we need to count, as Darren Springer has said repeatedly, on a life cycle basis. So let's see the life cycle analysis. I'll stop there and maybe submit some further comments after I watch the Velerity report, which I can't stay for in full, but we'll watch the recording. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pike.
Can I just say that Pike sent the committee two emails today, one timed 2:56 p.m. and one timed 3:43. The one at 3:43 has an attachment. I have forwarded them to Julia for for inclusion into the public comments. Thank you. He has mentioned both of those, I think, in regard to in his other comments, but I think that
you submitted both the 255 and the 342.
that is correct, although their minutes are a little different on mine, but yes, I sent them to Julia just now.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak at public forum this evening? Seeing nobody, I will go ahead and close public comment and turn to the first item on our agenda. I'm going to get our agenda back up here, which is the Velerity report. And we have for intro from General Manager Smith.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Darren Springer, General Manager with Burlington Electric. I'm joined by colleagues Mike Herron and Seth Clifford from the McNeil team, and one of our commissioners, Alan Kenny, is here as well from the Burlington Electric Commission. We're joined online by Brad and Catherine from Velerity, and I just wanted to just contextualize very briefly before we jump into the report, which I'm excited about, and which includes a number of potentially interesting options and technologies for how we may reduce stack emissions and or increase efficiency at the McNeil site. This report stems from the 2023 District Energy Resolution. Velerity's, the RFP that led to the selection process was reviewed at the Commission, the TEUC, and the City Council. The selection of Velerity and the scope of work was likewise reviewed and approved at the Commission, TEUC, and City Council. So it's been a rigorous process. We didn't know Velerity, had not heard of them prior to this process. Delighted that we've had the chance to work with them. They've been here in person multiple times and at the McNeil site and at Pine Street meeting with us to seek information. And I think they have a work product here that merits consideration from the entire community. We remain in joint ownership at McNeil, so we're not able to immediately or unilaterally implement anything. However, my interest and BED's interest is going to be in particular to review three of the options here that are cited as having cost effectiveness for ratepayers and providing significant efficiency and emission reduction possibilities. And those, which will be detailed further, include the organic Rankine cycle, the carbon capture, and the wood pyrolysis options that are discussed. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it to Brad and Catherine, and appreciate their being here with us to present this essentially final report to the committee.
Darren, thank you very much. Is the audio okay?
We're getting a little
Yes.
bit of delay, but try again, Brad.
Yeah. So can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Yep.
We can hear you.
So Darren, appreciation for you and your team for the data you've provided and the meetings we've held. And we're happy to present this information today. How much time do we have?
We're scheduled for 40 minutes for presentation and for questions. Is that enough? In your view, I mean, do you think that's?
Oh, perfect. Yes. We're going to try to move quickly, and we're certainly open to questions as well.
And we can be a
So,
little bit flexible if necessary.
Say that again.
We can be a little bit flexible on time limitations if necessary. Because we appreciate.
And okay. And the logistics, should I do a screen share?
Yeah, that'd be good. Yes, if you could. The alternative would be for you to share the presentation. I mean, let's try that to start with, I guess.
Okay, do you see it?
We do.
Great. So the agenda today is very simple. We'll review the resolution and scope of work. We'll present on setting an emissions baseline from which to calculate improvements. And then the two key areas of the project, one is to review the potential emissions reduction initiatives. And the other main part of the project is to look at the renewables and storage needed if McNeil were not in service, subject to rate impacts and you know, the economics and the renewable status. This is a lot of detail, but we paid careful attention to Resolution 7.6 to develop a task plan and to implement that task plan. I will not spend time on this now, but it is for reference because it was the initiating event and guided the work project. As I mentioned, the two key areas of the project on the left and right boxes. One is to analyze the range of potential initiatives to reduce stack emissions by 25% and 50%. And the second major area of the study was to determine the scale and types of renewables and energy storage required if McNeil were not in service, and to consider only those solutions which are both reliable and affordable, and to maintain the renewable energy status by the state of Vermont. So on the range of potential initiatives, we established a baseline. We identified and characterized potential emission reduction initiatives, and we looked at those potential initiatives in a sequence. We looked at the emissions impacts, we looked at the operating cost impacts, and then we looked at the capital requirements and the impact on rates. The scale and types of renewables, we had to develop an understanding of how McNeil operates, what the role of McNeil is in the city of Burlington, but also with regards to stakeholders. Look at the economic value that it develops for the stakeholders, and to understand how to maintain reasonable rates and the renewability status with different scenarios, and we'll present our findings therein. The boundary conditions, as mentioned, maintain 100% renewable energy designation and maintain rates that don't materially change, especially considering economically disadvantaged customers. McNeil has had ups and downs in terms of generation, and you can see in the left chart, one is the energy production in the blue bars, and the yellow line is the wood consumption. And it's no surprise to anybody in the room that they are highly correlated. But we can also see there was a peak in 2016 and generally a downsloping trend, except for the Ukraine war in 2021, when natural gas prices spiked, and that made running McNeil more favorable in the ISO New England market, so the operating profile increased. And we can see, again, no surprise, that the emissions vary as well. And this is part of understanding, what's the starting point? If we want to reduce emissions by 50%, what number do we start with? So we took a look at the basis for a baseline to establish a starting point to model different emission reductions. And we determined that over the past 5 years, the average emissions is about 350,000 tons per year. And we decided to set that as the baseline. And then consequently, if we want to reduce off the baseline by 25%, that's an 88,000 ton per year reduction. If we want a 50% reduction off the baseline, that's 176,000 tons per year. We then also looked at 2024 and used that as a model year and ran our estimations for achieving the emission reductions off of 2024. And that will become clear in terms of how that works. We can see here The left blue bar is the emissions baseline, 352,000 tons per year. And we can see the two 25% and 50% reduction levels in the middle of the chart. And then on the far right, we can see the 2024 emissions, 277,000 tons per year. So to move from the 2024 emissions of 277,000 tons per year to a 25% reduction off of the baseline requires only a 4.7% reduction in emissions. And to achieve a 50% reduction off of 2024, off of the baseline, using 2024 as the starting point, we would need to reduce emissions by 36.5%, from 277,000 to 176,000. We identified 12 potential initiatives to analyze for the McNeil plant in terms of reducing stack emissions. And let me just help categorize some of these. They included, for example, low carbon fuels as one opportunity, and that would be blending in ammonia, blending in renewable natural gas, and renewable natural gas from wastewater treatment plants or landfills through the pipeline. The next step was to identify potential efficiency improvements in the core system, and that would include things like the wood chip drying would improve efficiency because there's less moisture that you have to heat in the combustion process. The oxy-fuel combustion that actually improves the combustion by generating oxygen and injecting that oxygen directly into the combustion chamber instead of atmosphere. There's also biomass gasification, another strategy, and the circulating fluidized bed boiler to improve the combustion efficiency. And then we have the air fuel optimization and preheating of combustion fuel and preheating, of the combustion air. Now, just to be clear, the plant already does air fuel optimization to achieve a higher efficiency burn in the combustion chamber. They modulate that on a continuous basis. And they also preheat the combustion air as well. And so those measures are already implemented. And then finally, you can also take waste energy from the stack, excess heat that's going up the stack, and use that heat through an organic Rankine cycle to generate additional electricity. And then also at the back end of the plant, you can just capture the carbon and keep it from being released into the atmosphere. And then finally, frankly, similar to the biomass gasification, you have a wood pyrolysis, which is a separate process that would be in parallel to the plant. That would be use wood chips as the input and generate electricity as the output. And the touch points for pyrolysis for the plant would be the wood chip handling operations and the interconnection to the grid in terms of the transmission and distribution infrastructure. But again, it would be a separate plant in addition or in replace McNeil. It's important to understand that all of these have different impacts on the system. And we ran each of these potential initiatives through independent analyses to understand the technologies, understand the emissions impacts, and begin to understand we actually modeled out the energy flows in the systems. And then to the degree that we were able to hit certain emissions targets associated with the 25% and 50% reductions, we then would look at the operating cost impact of these initiatives, principally looked at what the fuel costs would be, the impact on electricity. And then we also looked at the CapEx requirements, the capital expenditure required to put these systems in place. And we actually ran a model that looked at the rate impact associated with both changes in the operating costs and the CapEx for implementing these initiatives. So it was a sequence screening. As you can see, certain initiatives were discarded early because it was clear that there was experience already. For example, the biomass gasification, there was a DOE project to pursue that, and it was abandoned at some point. And the input on this project was that was not an initiative that BED would pursue, that had already happened and it had been abandoned, frankly. We also, the circulating fluidized bed boiler would mean ripping out the entire central portion, or at least the combustion chamber system in the plant. And it was considered that the improvement in efficiency would not was overwhelmed by the CapEx that would be required for that rebuild in the plant. The air fuel optimization, that's already implemented, and the preheat of the combustion air is already implemented as well, which was good to see. And it's interesting that the preheating of the combustion air, the plant makes good use currently of the waste heat coming out the backside of the plant. It preheats the water for the steam generator, and it also preheats the combustion air. So there's already two systems that are drawing upon the available energy, waste energy, in the stack as well. There also is a oxy-fuel combustion initiative that was the amount of energy it takes to generate oxygen from the atmosphere and air separation unit is equivalent to the gain in the combustion efficiency. So it's not an initiative that would be pursued. On the emissions side, we took a look, and this is in no particular order, we took a look at the wastewater plants in Burlington, and calculated how much RNG could be produced. And the truth is that it would be a very limited amount of RNG. I think it would only reduce the requirements for the plant by 3%. So it's not worth pursuing. Needless to say, the wastewater treatment plants are likely to put in anaerobic digesters anyway over time. The wood chip drying, similar. The amount of waste energy that was available to dry the wood chips was insufficient to make much of an impact relative to the capital requirements for the wood chip drying system. It's a very positive kind of initiative, but at the end of the day, there just was not enough thermal energy available to make much of a difference in terms of reducing the moisture in the wood. And then the organic ranking cycle, that also is a waste heat strategy. It's deployed all over the world in many industrial plants. You capture waste heat and you run a ranking cycle turbine, and you basically generate additional electricity. And we determined that on one level it could produce, I think, 3% of the electricity that McNeil produces. And in another, where you put in a lower temperature range you could produce 8%. So we don't really have that in the most promising, but I think that would be the third option to consider for the plant, which is to look at the waste heat recovery for generating electricity. And one of the issues, of course, is that the stack is a steel-lined stack that is subject to corrosion from sulfur formations in the emissions. And if the temperature is reduced too much, that there will be precipitation or condensation, excuse me, on the inside of the stack, and that would include potentially sulfur compounds that would corrode the stack liner. So you can't reduce the stack temperature below 250 degrees. But there is a strategy you actually can, and this is done. They put a polymer lining in the stack, and you can actually reduce the stack temperature to about 100 degrees, and that is one of the options available, and people do that as well. But you have to put in a protective sleeve within the stack so that it does not get corroded with the lower temperature and the sulfur compound impacts. Finally, there are blending options, and the blending options are really just a cost plus initiatives. You can buy renewable natural gas through the pipeline system on a wholesale basis. The cheapest RNG is landfill natural gas, and the cost is just too high of the fuel. You basically are nearly, I think, tripling the fuel cost compared to wood for RNG. And ammonia, it's a similar, in fact, worse situation. Ammonia is used around the world to reduce emissions. NH3 has no carbon, and they're using it in Germany and Japan to reduce carbon emissions on coal plants and peat type plants and biomass plants. So it is a technical option, but it has a high impact in terms of cost. If you wanted to do a small amount of RNG, that is doable. But when you have increasing quantities of RNG, it begins to have a more material impact on the economics. And then finally, the most promising are for cost-effective reduction of emissions. One is carbon capture, and the second is wood pyrolysis. And this is essentially the summation of the work that we've been performing. So we'll just have this is a summary of the analysis we did. We decided to look at two axes of importance. One is the rate impact, which is the vertical axis, and the other is the emissions reduction of the specific measure that was evaluated. And to point out that based on the use of a 5-year baseline and the 2024 as the year of record, the emissions for 25% reduction would be about 17,000 tons per year, and that's over in the left side of the chart. And then the 50% reduction is just over 100,000 tons per year, and that's over in the right side of the chart. So we saw wood chip drying, for example, putting aside the economics of specific projects, just looking at the rate impact and the carbon impact, we can see that there's not much impact from a carbon perspective. the small calculated rate impact. ORC1 and ORC2, those are the two different versions of organic Rankine cycle. ORC1, we limit the temperature in the stack to 250 degrees. So we're pulling the temperature from 350 degrees to 250 degrees and using that energy to generate electricity. It's just is not enough carbon reduction. And then you can see for hitting the 25% reduction, you can do some ammonia blending or some RNG blending. You can see ammonia is just off the charts, but RNG at a small level does not have too much of a rate impact. And then carbon capture, and we would strongly suggest you would never do a small carbon capture program at the plant, that you would want to do a larger one than is recognized here. Then we also see the limit on ORC2, organic Rankine cycle, with the liner put in the stack where we can drop the flue temperature from 350 degrees down to 100 degrees. You can get a lot more energy out of it, and you can reduce the amount of production you need from McNeil. You're basically offsetting electricity production, improving the efficiency of wood to electricity. But again, there's a limit. You can only get about 25,000 tons per year in terms of reduction of emissions, and that's the limit. So then we go over to the right side of this chart and take a look at what can achieve a 50% reduction in carbon emissions. And we have pyrolysis, carbon capture, RNG blending, and ammonia blending. And we can see that the two projects that have the smallest impact on two initiatives that have the smallest impact on rates and can achieve a 50% reduction in carbon emissions are pyrolysis, wood pyrolysis, and carbon capture. It's important to note that this chart represents a comparative analysis between all of these options, and there certainly can be a greater fine pencil point on the analyses on selected initiatives to pursue going forward. But we've identified what we would say are the leading horses in the race on this type of initiative. So just some background material on carbon capture and pyrolysis before we get to the next phase here. The most comprehensive source of information are 110 wood-fired CHP facilities in Sweden that all have carbon capture systems installed. A very robust source of data for the assessment. I will say, for example, Microsoft has taken a great interest in carbon capture associated with wood. The reason being is that they consider, for better or worse, they consider wood to be carbon neutral. And then if you actually capture the carbon from the emissions, the whole process becomes carbon negative. And so this is one reason that Microsoft is making investments in carbon capture associated with wood to power wood-powered power plants as well. We have this is a viable, and we certainly looked at the operating and capital requirements associated with these projects and modeled carbon capture for McNeil. Now, another point I want to mention is that carbon capture, we're talking about they have a phrase called CCUS, and CCUS stands for carbon capture, use, and sequestration. And in this case, there's a difference between sequestration and use. And in most cases, for example, in Sweden, they have pipelines which aggregate the captured carbon, and they have wells where they pump it down deep in the geostrata and sequester it. And the same, there's a series of these projects which they're putting in pipelines in Louisiana, and they're sequestering the carbon dioxide deep underground, usually 2 miles below the surface. And that allows you to capture the carbon credits because it's considered permanent disposal of carbon. For BED, we looked at an intensive study done by the state of New York on the opportunity for carbon capture and sequestration in New York. We don't see that there are appropriate geologic strata to sequester the carbon. And so we looked at the CO2 market. And so for BED, what would happen is the carbon would be captured from the flue. It would be reduced in temperature to a very low temperature, at which it becomes a liquid. And then it's put in a truck, and the truck takes it to market. There is an active market in the Northeast in New England for CO2. And we would envision that I think 100,000 tons a year would possibly represent about 20% of the Northeast market for CO2. And this is one of the benefits of carbon capture model, is that there's a source of revenue in terms of selling the CO2 into the market. It does have implications for the value of the carbon credits, because instead of sequestration, the carbon is being used and essentially cuts the value in half of a carbon credit. But that would need to be further investigated. So it would, that's one of the reasons that the economics are favorable, is that there is a market for the CO2 that helps in terms of this process. Now, we did a relative analysis to determine what the impact on rates would be. And this is just detail that's available, but it does need to be explained very briefly. What we did, for example, is we put all the numbers on a single year. So the CapEx number on this chart is a annualized, basically an annualized capital payment associated with a 20-year investment of the CapEx required for a carbon capture initiative. And so we don't want to have you think that that number represents the actual CapEx. It's an annualized payment stream associated with capitalizing the capital investment associated with the carbon capture. Now, in wood pyrolysis, which is, let's just explain this very briefly. Pyrolysis is a thermal process where you heat up a material to about 900 degrees centigrade, and you decompose the molecules into their constituent parts. It's not a combustion process. You're basically breaking up the molecules of the feedstock. And in this case, the feedstock is wood chips. And what comes out of this process is a biochar is precipitated out. And then there's a syngas, which comes out of the pyrolysis process. And that syngas can then be used you can turn it into renewable natural gas. You can clean it up to just have hydrogen come out, or you can actually just use the syngas as a fuel in a turbine for a generator. And so we modeled the use of syngas in a combined cycle gas turbine We had discussions with multiple vendors of this equipment to make sure we had the analytics correct. So basically, there's a combustion turbine coupled with a steam turbine to produce electricity, and there are emissions which do go up the stack in this. But the benefit is twofold. First of all, the efficiency of the syngas to electricity process is about 63%, and the existing McNeil plant is about 26% efficient. So there's a step up in that efficiency. Now, there is a penalty associated with the pyrolysis process itself because it requires thermal energy, and that's an important part of the calculation. In terms of carbon, the pyrolysis process produces biochar, which is then a fairly significant portion of the carbon in the wood that then is sold into typically agricultural markets as a soil additive. So here we're getting reduced carbon, we're getting a sellable product in terms of biochar, and we're getting a significant step up in efficiency. And overall, that's really where the benefit comes in a wood pyrolysis type process. And we've provided some of the numbers on the calculation in terms of background information.
Brad, if I could just add a quick point on the prior chart before we jump ahead. Just for analysis purposes, the CapEx for the wood pyrolysis doesn't include potential infrastructure upgrades we might need to make on our system. So it's very good and interesting technology, but I just wanted to flag that we didn't have an estimate for that piece of it.
Thank you. So that's the review of the potential initiatives. We now move into the second part of the project, which was to look at renewables and storage needed if McNeil were not in service. And again, we've actually brought in the actual verbiage from the City Council resolution to make it clear. And we also have the boundary conditions to make sure that BED can be qualified as 100% renewable and to maintain rates that don't materially impact the customers of BED. So the role of McNeil is basically it's sort of a list. It's cost-effective electricity. It satisfies renewable categorization. It's able to have an offer price that allows for a good position in the merit order on the ISO New England wholesale market. It contributes a significant amount of electricity to the city of Burlington, clearly. And it also, because it's I think gross, it's a 62 megawatt plant, but it basically gives BED about a 25 megawatt capacity capability that helps meet BED's capacity load obligation to ISO New England. And that's these things, and the fact that it's cost-effective electricity, it has a renewable categorization, and it provides significant capacity to meet the needs of ISO New England, or the obligation that Burlington has to the ISO New England peak. Those are very important considerations, very difficult to replicate simply as well. And let's not forget, it certainly contributes to the regional economy in a meaningful way, both through the wood economy and then the service maintenance and CapEx expenditures as well in the region through McNeil. Now, the cost is interesting. The wood cost is very compelling. Comes out to be approximately $4.40 per MMBTU. That's lower than the average cost of natural gas in the last 4 years. There have been maybe I think 5 years and 6 years ago, I think natural gas was less expensive. And certainly the virus that we had in 2020, 2021 contributed to low natural gas prices, and so that's where. But for some reason, somehow, BED has done a great job in being able to procure wood cost effectively. So it has a good value per MMBTU. Now, the other way that the plant materially contributes to the economics is maybe less apparent, but it's sort of like an if-then statement. And certainly we look at what the node price is for wholesale electricity on ISO New England for the Vermont node. And the data that we have on the left, that scattered looking chart, is the hourly price for electricity in the Vermont node for the ISO New England in January of 2025. And we just wanted to take a look at some foundational data and see what McNeil would contribute at a certain operating level and how the economics work. So the red line that we see is the implied offer price in the wholesale market based on I think it's a 85.8% capacity factor. So the McNeil plant in January of 2024 was operating 85% of the time. And presumably it would cut in at a certain price on the ISO New England market. They would call upon McNeil to operate. And in that particular month in 2024, the plant actually came on once and then had a warm start once. So when the plant operates, it pretty much operates for a fairly extended period of time. And the way the economics work is that if McNeil just wasn't operating, which obviously happens over different parts of the year, the BED would have to pay the market price for the electricity that they're not providing. And certainly, if we look at a winter night in Vermont, there may be some wind, there may not be some wind. Wind only operates about 33% of the time. There certainly would be no solar operating. And this gets to sort of the crux of this whole assessment, which is what are you going to do? If McNeil is not operating, and there are times when it's not operating, you're going to be pulling power off the grid as a requirement to meet the need. And so the chart on the right basically shows the red line being the offer price, and the hatched area are all the hours in the month that the McNeil plant is operating. And the blue line that looks like a ski slope from low on the left side, high on the right side, that's just the stacked prices in order of ascension, starting from the hours with the lowest price and going up to the hours with the highest price. So it's like a price duration curve, as it were. And if any one of those hours in the hatched area, if McNeil were not operating, BED would have to pay the blue line price. But because McNeil's operating, that's their cost of power is the red line. So there's a significant benefit that McNeil provides as a hedge to higher prices off the grid. Now, the Gentleman Pike Porter earlier mentioned that that this is not the only option. This is just a short-term thing. Certainly, you would not, you would enter into contracts for hydro or something else instead of having to pay the grid price. But unless you have a generator that's operating in the middle of the night in January, you're going to be paying a market price for that power because your solar or your wind just won't be reported on the grid. And so this has very important implications for what are you going to do about that? You can't just let it go to the market and then green it up with RECs. You'd actually increase the rates by close to 20% over the course of a year if you pursued that strategy. We're not suggesting that strategy, but this is just one thing to look at, which is understand, well, how does McNeil provide value to the people of Burlington and as a hedge to higher prices off the grid and ability to provide renewable energy. Those are two very important roles that it plays. So when we look at the types of renewable energy and energy storage required if McNeil were not in service, we want to look at providing renewable energy, about 111,000 megawatt hours a year. We want to look at what it takes to meet the annual capacity load obligation that Burlington has to the ISO New England. And those are the two major considerations, factors. Ancillary services, that provides value now, but that disappeared. You're not forced to actually provide those. So there's no real, my understanding is there's no real material obligation associated with ancillary services. It really gets to how do we produce renewable energy to the tune of 111,000 megawatt hours a year, and how do we meet approximately a 25 megawatt, let's say, load obligation if McNeil were not in service. So we looked at categories of resources that could be used, and we'll just go over the blue boxes first. Generation with high effective load carrying capacity. The ELCC, the effective load carrying capacity, is a percentage that's applied to every generation resource on the ISO New England system. And it really is a percentage likelihood that a resource will be available to meet the peak load requirement on the grid once a year. And if that is not, solar will have an extremely low, will have like a very low number, below 50%. I mean, below 5% certainly. Wind would have a low number, etc. So it sort of begins to tell us, we're going to need something that's dispatchable during those times. And the things we identified, hydropower and this wood pyrolysis that we've been discussing. They're both renewable and will be on during the help mitigate price impacts off the grid. Dispatchable generation for capacity, already have a combustion turbine, you could add another, you can put a reciprocating engine in as well. Those are both effective solutions to meet your capacity requirement. The utility scale, it's incredible in California. California has a 51 gigawatt grid. Obviously, that's big, but they also have 17 gigawatts of batteries already installed. In other words, 1/3 of their peak is already equivalent to the capacity of all their battery energy storage systems on their grid. And they have a plan to go to, I think, 45 gigawatts of battery energy storage in the next 10 years. So we understand that BED is planning a 5 megawatt system, and it's likely that the costs and capability of those systems will improve. And it would be a strong recommendation to identify a longer duration battery energy system. There are 4 municipalities in North America that are implementing 100 hour duration energy storage systems. There will be a significant arbitrage opportunity going forward. Those systems are not very efficient, but 5 megawatts would certainly be a starting point for BED, and it's likely in the next 10 years that there'll be another 5 megawatts added in battery energy storage as the prices improve and the duration improves. Then distributed energy resources, we've discussed this during the project. We didn't spend a whole lot of time understanding where BED is on this, but certainly you're well aware of the Green Mountain, I think it was Green Mountain Power and the virtual power plant initiative and bring your own battery and so on, that there are opportunities to use batteries that are distributed out in the network and to encourage their deployment and then allow use by Burlington as part of the mix of meeting the capacity load obligation that BED has to the ISO New England. So this was the mix of resources that we considered were in the range of what could be applied. And then we came up with two scenarios. One is the wood pyrolysis scenario, and the other is the hydropower scenario. And you can see that we created these charts that look at the energy and capacity that's contributed here. And again, it's the same story, which is how much capacity can you get from the renewable energy resource, and then how do you complement that with additional sources of capacity in order to meet the various obligations going forward. And certainly hydropower, we do know that I think you made an agreement with the Connecticut enterprise for some hydropower last year. The amount of hydropower available, I know there's a project that's going forward in Maine, is probably very limited, and it's going to be a time-constrained, opportunistic resource. It's not something you can just go build as well. So they're very, very important timing considerations with any hydropower resources, but that certainly would be ideal. And then the wood pyrolysis is certainly another area to explore. As it is similar to the existing plant, it would be classified as renewable and then dispatchable and provide the price mitigation, price hedging capability that you already have with McNeil. And then you'd need to complement it with some of these other capacity resources, whether it's a BED, megawatt scale, battery energy storage, or distributed energy resources therein. So I apologize for the speed at which I am speaking this evening. It's a lot of material that we pursued in this project, and I appreciate the opportunity to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Brad. And I appreciate the time and the thoroughness you took to go through the report. We've been, I think we passed this resolution a couple of years ago, so I think it was worth taking that time this evening. So with that, I'll open it up for some questions. Before I do, though, I'd like to say a couple of things. The first is we do have other items on our agenda. So I'm wondering if we can hit the high points tonight and then talk about next steps for how we maybe further process some of the recommendations here. And then secondly, I'd like to welcome Howard Hughes here from the Electric Light Commission and invite you to participate in this discussion that we're going to have. And I'd like us, if we could, to sort of maybe conclude and maybe give it 12 to 15 minutes for questions so we can move on to other topics on our agenda. If we need more, we can talk about that as well. So I'll open it up.
So I got a list of questions that I think is probably best for me just to get out on the table and then not actually have them answered necessarily tonight, right? Going forward, just I might not be really clear on them. So that would be what my approach would be. That way we can keep moving and we can get our stuff done. At least get it.
I would suggest that you could also get them in get the questions that we have in writing. So get your questions out, man.
I'll get them out here. They're in scratch that I can barely read. So the first one is trying for me to understand why we are measuring the emission reduction based on the last year, the 2024, instead of either over the full 15 years that you've got there, or even a 10-year period. There is a question that Mr. Porter raised regarding the EPA data and emissions that he asked for a response to, and we've got that now in the public record, and so I would like to hear that. If oh goodness gracious, what was this on? Market changes. If it's, I think this had to do with the carbon. Yes, has to do with the carbon capture. And you had mentioned that there's a market out there. And so I'm wondering if you've analyzed whether what the market changes would be if it becomes widely adopted. So right now you've got a certain market for it, but if other municipalities, if other power companies or whatever would start to adopt this, I think you were saying the sequestration of carbon, what that would do to the market, and also a little bit more detail into what the cut in the rec price would be. You mentioned that if you go out and you sell it, then we're going to get a cut in that rec price, and I hope I'm understanding that. So that
carbon credit price
or carbon, whatever there was, he mentioned something there. It just, yeah. So the financial analysis, and you did mention this, that there are some issues related with their caveats, and I would just like them listed for us on both the carbon capture and the carbon hydrolysis. You mentioned the source, that there needs to be a source of thermal energy for pyrolysis. I'm wondering what the investigation has been on the source for that, if we were to have that in McNeil. If we adopt both of these suggested technologies, then does this incentivize our a greater wood consumption at the plant? If you know what I mean on that. And that does sort of tie back into then the way we look at the emissions and the time period that we've got, whether it's a 2024 or you actually are going through an average of all of those 15 years. And then trying to understand much clearer if that benchmark, which 2024 is pretty low in comparison to the rest of the years, what that means in terms of emissions as well as the economics. And the last point relates to your final slide and the different options for replacing McNeil. If we were to, like, McNeil's gone, how do we get that 26 to 29 megawatts? What I'm saying is that's what we are.
for us. It's 25 to
25 to 27 megawatts. It was really the megawatts that I was saying.
Yes.
And I think that would I'd be sort of interested in more analysis or more detail on what you have gotten on that. My initial question was, had you investigated solar and hydro and wind and battery storage as an alternative to buying on the spot market? And it appears that you have, and those last slides actually indicate that. I wrote my question before that. but a little bit more detail on that. And I don't think that we can really have the time to go into any of that stuff. I can try my best to write this stuff, send it in.
What would be the best way to take some of these questions, do you think?
If you want to send them to me in a written form,
Yeah.
some of them we might be able to answer or provide context, and I'm happy to reach out to Brad. I know they've concluded essentially their engagement with us, but I'd be happy to reach out for some clarifications on a few of these points, to the extent we don't have, time to detail everything tonight.
Yeah, great, thanks,
Okay.
I can do that.
And with that, we'll turn to Merritt, see what you have. Merritt, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this report. The detail is appreciated, but I'm going to do the opposite of what Councilor Bergman did and allow myself to digest this report. And then I will, if I have questions, I will send them, and I'm looking forward to us discussing this further. Thank you.
Thanks, Merritt. Ellie, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just had, it ties into one of the first questions. I'm having a little bit of trouble with the decision on the absolute emissions idea and how you modeled that out. And so when you're thinking of the alternative options, are you looking at the same amount of power generated? And then calculating their emissions reduction? Versus
Yes.
the relative amount per unit generated? Is that how that works?
Yeah, we had to pick, I can't remember what the exact terminology would be, but we had to pick an example year, right, on which to model. So it's consistent between all of the different initiatives.
So assuming that the same amount of power was generated as it was in 2024, then there would be an emissions reduction for other technology.
Precisely.
Okay, great. And then I had two other questions. One on the if McNeil were not in service idea. The one with pyrolysis. Why would you need to add additional capacity than what is already available? I guess I was confused by that. I mean, it seems like utilities battery storage is a good idea anyway to be pursuing. But why would you also then have to add that? Because wouldn't you be generating the same amount and have the same capacity available? No, is it less? I guess trying to understand that.
Brad, if I can jump in, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the wood pyrolysis of 111,000 megawatt hours that's in the back is BED's portion of the energy that's produced at McNeil. It's not the entire plant, just to be clear, it's just our piece. McNeil also provides us, I believe, 26 to 27 megawatts of capacity. The wood pyrolysis unit would not be as large from a capacity standpoint as McNeil is today. So I think the analysis Brad did was what additional things, storage and otherwise, you would add in to reach the capacity level you have today with the current plan.
So I guess help me understand that if that's one of the best options for section 1. Are we saying that it wouldn't be able to generate, if we put in the technology, it wouldn't be generating the same amount of power through that technology?
It would theoretically generate the same amount of power as BED gets, not the joint owners from McNeil today, but it would not produce the same amount of capacity because those are two different attributes. And we would need additional battery storage or other capacity purchases to make up the difference. In terms of megawatt hours of energy, you could potentially generate. And the other thing just to note about wood pyrolysis is, I think it was in the slides, it's more of a base load technology. It'll run more or less, 24/7, whereas McNeil, we treat more as an asset that ramps for certain periods when prices are high, particularly winter and summer. So there's some differences in sort of when it generates, and there's some economic differences related to that. It's still an outstanding technology to investigate, in my view.
And then my last question, which I think was a shared question, the financials you had to rush through them a little bit. I think just some additional information would be really helpful on those, especially like I have more questions on how you did the CapEx? Is it a 20-year also for pyrolysis? Like, I think those are important notes. Maybe there's a separate Excel sheet, but I think we really need to know a little bit more understanding on that CapEx.
On
And
slide
some,
14.
what did you say?
On slide 14.
I don't see numbers on my, oh yeah, I do, okay.
The
Yeah.
CapEx carrying cost.
I think just some more information to make sure we understand what you have there would be helpful, because I think you just had to move through it in the interest of time. So that could be a later ask that we could get.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And some of my questions have already been asked. Additionally, I had a question that I think was raised by Pike Porter in public forum as well, on slide 18. Why January was used, and maybe it's because it's one of our larger, it's a month where we generate more power, but understanding more about why it was chosen for this example. And then also I had questions about whether or not we would still get sort of the benefit that we currently give that was described sort of under the blue curve on that slide, with the additional, if we were to implement a carbon capture and pyrolysis strategy, would we still get the savings, or would we or get that benefit, or would that be diminished some? So again, you know, it's 5:26 now, and this is sort of this is worthy of a whole meeting on its own. But I'm glad we had the time tonight to get this report out and at least get a first cut at some questions. But in terms of next steps, I'm wondering if we might not have another session on this with answers to questions that maybe you could.
I mean, I think if it's possible to get anything in writing, we can follow up with Velerity. I think our engagement is essentially complete this evening, so I can't speak for them joining another meeting, but I'd be happy to relay. I wonder if Brad might be able to speak to the January question now, if you have a moment. And
Sure. If
Yeah,
you want, Brad, and I didn't know what you're like I know our engagement is done with Velerity, and the work product was a report, but we will have ongoing sort of questions that arise from the report information. So go ahead.
So the just make it clear that January was not used to represent the year. Just make that absolutely clear. January was picked randomly. I didn't know what the data was. We just pulled the January data, put it together. And what it was used for was to represent the value stream that McNeil provides as a hedge to high prices. So when the grid goes up to 30 cents a kilowatt hour, you know, on off times, you're not paying that. You know, you're down a third of that basically. And so that's a real important value stream that McNeil provides. So the January, we did a projection for the whole year, but please do not think that we just took January and said that's one of 12 months and all the rest are the same. That's not the case at all. It was just really used to help understand how the ISO market works, how McNeil provides a hedge to high prices as well. They're, you know, so I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification, and I appreciate that. I do think it just happens that January, February are times when probably McNeil's always running and has the highest value stream, but I understand that it wasn't chosen for that reason. It was just chosen as a month to illustrate that value stream.
And kind of on our end, to your second question, we're looking at carbon capture and wood pyrolysis as kind of distinct options, not necessarily combined options, although I you know, it's interesting to consider it. I think the CapEx for either would be significant, and a significant kind of financing request that we would have to consider. But my understanding again of carbon capture is you'd run the facility similar to how you do today, but you'd have this additional technology, whereas wood pyrolysis could be an additional sort of baseload type technology that you could add to the facility, or you could have a not in service, you know, wood pyrolysis is running kind of year round kind of thing as well. So they do have differences relative to your question about the blue line, and we want to investigate that more. I mean, we're getting this sort of simultaneous as you are, so we're interested to investigate as well.
Thank you. I think for next steps, maybe, I'm sorry you didn't get your questions answered.
No, I had too many. This is perfect. We'll have a chance. We'll have Sarah come back and then we'll do that.
And then I'll work with Darren to determine how and when that comes back to the committee. That be acceptable, and we'll invite the commission members back too.
We expect to also discuss it at our next commission meeting as well. We'll have had a few weeks to digest at that point, so we'll continue the discussion there. I'll be in touch with Brad if there are written questions. Happy to seek some additional limited follow-up if he's willing.
Yeah, so you all heard of the lightning round in a game show, right?
Yeah.
I can answer most of these questions in less than a minute.
Oh, great, let's.
Okay.
Wow.
So just because I don't think you're all here, I think, you know.
Oh, we can do some lightning round. We might still need some more detail, but I'll
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, so if you look at emissions reductions by states, countries, cities, whatever, they all have a baseline. So we had to pick a baseline to work off of, and then we had to build a sample year. So that it's a construct, and we're open to any adjustments on that construct as well. I think Darren understands that.
And just be clear, the baseline was not 24. The baseline was a 5-year average. 24 was the model year, which happens to be a lower emission year. But if you're using the 5-year average and you had an increase, your job would be that much harder to reach the targets that they
Was
laid
it
out.
absolute emissions average or a relative emissions average? Absolute, right?
It was absolute.
On the 5 year, that's what my initial question was, and then I got thrown by that, but so.
That's why
The alter of the question would be then, if 5 years, why not still the 10 or the 15?
15 would probably actually be more favorable for us because the emissions were higher in prior years. So 5 creates a tougher target to reach than 15 or 10, but
Great. The other is the EPA data. We develop EPA data with the team, shared with the team. You know, that can change. I mean, that's a source thing. And certainly Darren understands that as well, the emissions data. But that we established data, discussed it multiple times, and just went with it. The carbon capture market changes if widely adapted. Yes, there's a risk factor on the sale price of CO2. No question about it in a business model. And those risks should be understood on a going forward basis. The cut in the REC price are really carbon credit. We didn't actually calculate carbon credits in the carbon capture models. There is a value, there's a private market, and then there are public markets. And that needs to be looked into, but we didn't include that in the calculation. So the current analysis wouldn't be subject to that. Caveats on financial, we'll have to take care of that. Source of thermal energy for pyrolysis is actually the syngas that comes out of it. It comes out at 900 degrees C, and that heat is recovered. So it's a thermal energy is within the system and recovered. I think that's mostly, yeah. I think we discussed some of the other questions. Oh, and the does this incentivize greater wood consumption? That was a very interesting question, because if the plant all of a sudden is able to have a lower offer price to the ISO New England, it would be called upon more often by ISO New England. But we don't have any scenario where that essentially takes place, certainly. In fact, we see the opposite. We sort of see, who knows? I mean, that's a risk factor for BED, which is how often does McNeil get called up by ISO New England?
Okay, more to come on this. I really appreciate you being here today, Brad and Catherine. We'll follow up with Darren on next steps and getting more sort of thorough written answers to some of the questions that we posted today.
thank you.
Thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. So hopefully we can a little faster and hopefully the next items. On our agenda, we'll turn next to Great Streets Bank and Cherry update.
The question is whether or not we want to push this one to the end, it has to be here for the entire meeting, so we could push this one and then get to the other items.
Move recycling now?
What's that?
And move recycling now?
Or Great Streets,
You tell me,
I'm sorry, Unaccepted Streets, yeah.
Unaccepted Streets? Is there any objection to moving the agenda around?
Do we have Philip here?
He is online. I believe he was gonna come up.
Okay,
as well.
You tell me, I'll accommodate staff.
all right,
It could be him.
that might be him right now, so,
Just like that.
yeah.
Here, switch it up.
Yeah,
Okay, we're switching it up, and I guess instead of Bank and Cherry, we're moving to Unaccepted Streets. We have 30 minutes allotted, I'm hoping we can. I don't wanna rush things too much, but it's fine, but I think there's more work to do on this one as well.
Thanks. I'm Phil Peterson, Senior Transportation Engineer and Planner with the City of Burlington.
Alex Schwenke, excavation inspector for the city of Burlington.
I think that Laura is joining us online as well.
Yes, I'm writing it down.
So thank you for the opportunity to discuss unaccepted and private streets in Burlington. So today's discussion is about bringing clarity, consistency, and some fairness as to how we deliver services across our street network. As I said in my memo, unaccepted streets, private streets are kind of this gray area of streets in the city of Burlington. A lot of them look like a public street, but legally they remain private or unaccepted. And this has created some confusion for residents and some inconsistency on how we allocate our limited resources. So to address this, Public Works, under the advisement of the Attorney's Office, is moving towards clearer service boundaries. Proposed transition date, which is proposed, is October 1st of next year. This timeline was informed by advice from the City Attorney's Office, which recommended that this issue be resolved sooner rather than later. We do have some liability around the issue, but what it really ultimately the decision rests with the City Council and feedback warrants. The timeline can be adjusted by council direction. So it is important to note that water, sewer, stormwater infrastructure on these streets is also governed by some pretty clear rules, and those rules apply whether it's a private street or not. And I think I had a back and forth with Councilor Bergman, Councilor Barlow earlier today to discuss some of those things. And residents have some paths to move forward, and Alice is maybe going to discuss some of those. They can contact the city for services under some kind of a cost recovery agreement. They can also go through the process of getting their street formally accepted, which can be a pretty heavy lift for several of these streets. It's not a simple or easy process. I think we were all here when we went through the process with Franklin Square, which was pretty complicated. So our immediate priorities are to engage with City Council, TEUC, and also affected residents, neighborhoods. And ultimately what we're asking for is the committee to refer this memo to full City Council so we can discuss it and have a dialogue and continue policy decisions and make sure everybody's in full alignment. Maybe Alice can discuss some of the services that we're talking about.
Yeah, for sure. So just to go into a little more details, Burlington currently has 55 unaccepted private streets, of which 32 are confirmed private. These streets are not forming part of the city accepted street network and have not been dedicated to public right of way. As Bill already mentioned, October 1st, 2026 of next year is when we planned on stopping the services for those streets. Connecting with Lee, he provided the details for pricing. These are just sort of a rough idea of pricing, which could be subject to change, but the truck with operator per time would be $143 per hour. Salt would be $110 per ton. While plowing typically takes about 10 minutes per snow event per street, the cost will vary depending on street length, configuration, and frequency of services. We haven't quite settled on if it's going to be a flat rate of $143 across street, but it's just giving a rough idea of what we're looking at on the city cost of maintaining the streets.
We don't really have a formula as of yet. It's but we at least wanted to provide some rates so that folks could get an idea on the scale of what these things cost.
So additionally to the plowing, there'd be the typical servicing of pothole filling, and with that, it'd be the truck and trailer and two laborers be $201 an hour. Asphalt $87 a ton, and cold patch $135 a ton, which we use during colder seasons for a little bit more immediate action. With recycling and other services, recycling collection of unaccepted and private streets is contingent on the condition of the accessibility of the roadway. So say the road is completely unpassable, say it's got too much snow, then we will not collect recycling.
Ultimately, this is about fairness and sustainability. And we want Burlington residents to understand rules and responsibilities and the options that are available to them. And as we kind of mentioned at the beginning, this is the beginning of a conversation that we know is going to take a pretty long time. And so we're happy to get into the discussion, take questions. Okay. So Laura, if you had anything to add to this.
Yeah, I do just want to be thoughtful. Philip used an L word earlier in the conversation. This does stem from two things. This is the risk to the city for the lack of clarity on what we have been doing and may or may not do in the future. And it's also about providing clarity to the residents on the street. Both sides of DPW struggle with explaining to property owners and renters on a street, why something is not being fixed, why surface maintenance is not being done, despite them having paid taxes. We provided the rates in the memo, which was requested the last time we gave an update and discussion on this. Just to really highlight, this is not a budget issue. This is really about the risk and providing clarity and potentially being able to find a path forward for a lot of these streets where they are just essentially stuck in limbo.
Okay, thank you. I guess we open it up for the committee questions if you're ready. Sure.
So I provided a list of questions and I got back, thank you very much, some responses. But fundamentally the responses are, we're going to get back to you. And I just want to say, I'll confirm the exact citations after today's meeting. I'll confirm it will be provided after consultation, blah, blah, blah. This is all okay. This is not a complaint of mine when I say that that's what your response was, because that's the appropriate response. But if you're looking for if you're looking for me to support sending a memo back or sending it up to the city council, then I want that stuff in the memo. So just for the public, we talk about things that implicate that, we basically are saying, where are we, we imply that we have legal authority, but we don't sort of state what that is. And I want us to lay that out. I actually think for liabilities purposes, it makes perfect sense to get out there in front and say, this is a source of our authority, and this is why we're doing stuff. So my list of questions really relates to that. And I can't support sending anything to the city council that does not sort of move from the memo that we got to what I think the one that we need, that the council needs. In regard to that, my list of questions, and I didn't get granular in terms of really matching up what my individual questions were with what the responses were. I do think that the response does not yet really get to a level of clarity in terms of the recycling. If we're not going to pick up recycling, because we use really basic words like the risk, right, and unpassable. I mean, we are telling people we're not coming. We should let them know exactly what the situation is, and we should have, it worked out what our legal notice, what our notice is going to be to those folks ahead of time. It's just like sort of common courtesy, and that's what I really want to have. I don't want to have all the cards and then just play them when we start to think about that. I drive many times a week down Intervale Road in the summertime, and that thing is terrible. I do it, right? It's not impassable. Your trucks drop dirt down there all the time. It's not impassable, but I could make an argument that it's impassable. In fact, my little car or that truck is really terrible for that truck. It probably should be considered unpassable except for the complications. So that level of explanation to people so that they can really be clear about what they're going to expect, because we have given them that, we need. And I think the same thing is true of the dollar amount. Now, in terms of the cost of this, I think that because you want to bring this to the council, and this is still a work in progress, it's okay to say these are this is the range, or this is what we're thinking right now, and then you're going to rework it. But as we go through, we need to have some clarity in place in terms of what we're going to be charging people. And I think that clarity needs to be in place a couple of months before we put this in operation, so that just people know that. So it's really a question of notice and fair notice, knowing full well that people don't focus on stuff and don't know how to get information, and we also don't make it so easy all the time to get information. So that is really not necessarily for the sending back to the council next, but is something that you just keep in mind in terms of the adoption of this. And I do think the last thing both Mark and I asked about, so I'm sorry if I'm going to take your thunder, the breakdown of the list into wards. That will be very helpful, and I mean, I think it makes perfect sense to have them in alphabetical order. But for us who are representative of wards, who think about our own constituents. Thank you.
Yeah, it's easy enough.
I do want to just quickly touch on a couple of points. This is a written response. The last time that we've done this, it was orally, because we were working on not generating a record before we were more ready. If you need to postpone this action to a future meeting, staff is agreeable to that, but we needed to get something in front of you to be able to start collecting these comments. Several of your questions are water resources orientated, and that division is just not available this week to really provide great clarity around your answer, which is the reason why Philip had responded the way that he did.
Yeah, I guess
I'm not let me just say, I am not criticizing you. Your response was no, but I'm not.
No.
I think I put it out today.
Sure.
It was late, and and I'm just getting this stuff out on the table so that we can get this stuff before you're kicking it back. We're kicking it upstairs.
Right.
So
Understood.
I no offense should have been given, was intended to be given, and I apologize if that was any
That's fine, yeah.
misunderstanding.
This is a large topic. This is the first time there's printed information. We look forward to coming back at a subsequent meeting with the follow-ups that you've asked for.
Yeah, it's been an ongoing conversation as maintenance requests have come up, and I'm glad that we're formalizing the city's position on some of these streets. But yeah, I do think it's bigger than, there's more to answer before we take something to the full council. Go ahead, Mayor.
Thank you. My questions were about the process of becoming accepted. So I see in the provided document the general requirements in the process. I'm not an expert on this, obviously,
Sure.
and I don't know, like, I still don't know, like, with each of these streets, like, who actually has the control over these streets. And I remember in our last conversation, some of them, nobody knows who has control over them, and there's kind of that fight over, I don't want it either. But I guess in terms of the process, and obviously there's a lot of steps here to get them to a place where the city is willing to accept them. Does the city provide any sort of help or technical support to whatever the owner of the street is or controller of the street is, to if they desire to get there but don't fully know who to reach out to arrange these things, or you know what I mean? Does the city provide support for that?
So we have worked with a couple of different kind of neighborhoods, homeowner groups, just groups of property owners on various different streets throughout my time that's been here. Some of them turn out that after going through a reasonable amount of effort to bring a street up to reasonable paving conditions or add a sidewalk, that the property owners who've made this investment decide ultimately that they don't want to dedicate. We have recently brought one through the council, Ledgewood, where we worked with that association pretty significantly to explain the standards, come to reasonable findings. We helped them negotiate with BED. I can do that as an internal city department, but as it relates to if they needed to go out and find a company that would have to pave a street if they were bringing it up, and that was what the council requested. We can't recommend a company, but we can give them specifications that they should be working towards to kind of break it down into a language that they get the product that they want, that's a reasonable price. We just can't recommend contractors to them. I do also want to highlight that the city council, and Philip can speak to it more specifically, he was very closely involved with Franklin Square, which is a little bit different of a scenario. Some of these are kind of odd. We find records from a time when we were transitioning between paper and electronic that are just hard to find and not well documented, where we find streets where they intended to dedicate, or a city engineer said, yes, we'll accept it, but the city council didn't say yes, or they said yes and no one provided the documentation. Ultimately, we accepted Franklin Square with very poor pavement condition, sidewalks that were in poor shape, stormwater work that needed to happen, but that is ultimately what the city council decided, that they could accept the cost it was going to take.
And an uncommon configuration too.
To bring the street up to standard, yes. And it had a very uncommon parking configuration, which was also a challenge that became DPW's to manage, was their on-street parking. So it is really all over the map. We ask for a lot in a street acceptance because these street acceptances were really built around new streets being constructed, not streets that had been constructed in a neighborhood association that never formed and nobody that's been paying dues to take care of them.
Right.
There is, I believe, something in the memo that speaks to that, and a benefit tax district. forget their exact words to.
It's something that's done in California. We didn't actually include that in the memo because it's just kind of muddy.
Okay.
So, I mean, so basically the idea behind it is that you're imposing an HOA onto the neighborhood. But as Chapin and I discussed last week, that kind of thing in a benefit assessment district is a situation where a neighborhood is benefiting from some kind of public infrastructure. And this is not the situation in this case, but I mean, we can look at all sorts of different ways of handling this. To answer your question in a really like the Reader's Digest version, it really comes down to, you know, two different things. There's the legal portion. You have a portion of land that requires dedication. It needs to be handed over to the city. It's almost like a ball being thrown at someone who's holding the glove. City council is the glove, they catch the ball and accept it. So the property has to be dedicated and the city has to accept it into public right of way. And the other element is the non-legal element, which is the quality of the streets. Because if we accept that street, it's ours now. Like whatever the condition that it's in, now it's gonna, the PCI, the sidewalks, all the standards that come along with that, and now we're responsible for that. And we have to make sure that for the health and safety of the folks that live on that street, that we're meeting our obligations, and that can be very expensive. And that we do have just limited resources when it comes to that kind of thing. There's no grants for that either. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, some more information that that I would be hoping to find. I really appreciate the examples that you provided at the end of the memo, basically discussing some of the different types of private or unaccepted streets that we have. I'd really want to know. I'd personally want to see comprehensively. Maybe this is just me. I'd want to see comprehensively why, if any of these streets could be accepted if they were dedicated now. Which ones could not. I'm not expecting us to go out to streets where this conversation isn't happening and figure out why. But for just information like that, because me personally, in my opinion, I want to make sure that, especially in the cases that we discussed last time of streets where there potentially is nothing happening on them that could be for many different reasons. But just like how a vacant building at some point needs to be, in my opinion, seized by the city so something good can be done with it, at some point a completely neglected street needs to be taken over and brought up to standard for the sake of the residents. But that is all part of this process. So I appreciate this. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. I had one of the questions I had around the geography and understanding where these all are. The reasons Gene was talking about, either streets in our districts or wards. You know, some of these I put them into Google Maps and even Apple Maps. I can't find, like Beechcrest Lake or Beechcrest Drive, and so. What would be really helpful, besides knowing what word they're in, is if we could superimpose them over a map. I'm not trying to create a.
We have created a GIS map.
Excellent.
It's user friendly right now. It's very it needs work.
It can be rough because it would at least help us to know where these are.
Understood. Yeah, we have created GIS map. It's just, it needs to be more user friendly, and
Okay.
I think it would create more questions.
Okay.
Give answers to, so that's definitely the process.
Okay,
It's
excellent.
understandable.
And then I would say, like, partly sort of riffing on what Merrick was asking, there's a whole like variety of situations here, right? Like there's out by end of town, Little Eagle Bay, that's a condo. It's a condo complex, and that's clearly a private road, you know, and I think they probably have a long established set of maintenance practices and arrangements with services to make sure that those are all maintained. Sure. But then I looked here and I was so surprised to see like West Road, which is like, it's been a street for what, 80, 90 years or something. You know, I know someone who grew up on that road who's older than I am, and I think he'd be surprised to find out that that's an unaccepted street that the city's probably been doing a lot of maintenance and work on, and so there's a few of those, like, you know, Wood Street's another one, that one's maybe newer. And then there's these, then those look like city streets, and then like some of the dirt roads, like North Cove Road and Deer Way out, we all know that those are the ones that we're constantly asked to do maintenance on because they wash out, and they need grading and whatnot. And those are more understandable, but I think, yeah, we're gonna have to do, it's gonna be a case by case probably, and we're gonna have to do some outreach and some hand holding and some facilitation of how we might move these streets into either an arrangement with the city or have them become fully accepted somehow. And so I think October of 26, although I appreciate the city attorney's you know, job of managing risk for the city, I think it's an unrealistic, maybe an unrealistic deadline. So, you know, maybe for some of these that would be a good date. For others, we might need one.
It might be worth thinking about it in the list of streets that we know are privately owned versus the ones that are unaccepted. The unaccepted ones are the ones that feel really hard. And don't get me wrong, like, we all work for the city because we care about the people who are here, and it feels hard for staff as well. The privately owned streets, I feel less bad about. The ones where we have moved over and we're doing some services, Chittenden and Iranistan and DeForest are probably the ones that people go, what? You guys don't own those? No, we don't. They are privately owned, but we do a lot of maintenance on them.
So, yeah, I appreciate it. And maybe that distinction is an important one as we move forward here. Another question I had was about the rates, the proposed rates. It said it might take 10 minutes to plow a street, but the rate's like $143 an hour. So are we talking about like potentially billing them $14 or what? I'm sorry.
I think it's a great question. And
or would we come into a service arrangement where they would be invoiced monthly or something? I don't know how that's handled.
We haven't gotten there with part of the conversation with you all. It's just a starting point.
But something we'd have to probably understand. Again, I could see that being sort of a case by case arrangement. This might not be unlike our arrangement with some of the nonprofit institutions in Pilot, where we negotiate and come to some sort of agreement with different entities and streets based on their situations, the degree of at least the unaccepted ones that may not have associations and good organization to become an adopted street in the city. So I just there's more work to be done, but I am thankful for the work that has been done in terms of trying to formalize this, because it does come up. I know Jake and I have talked several times about North Cove Road and Elbow Street, I guess it is. And appreciate the attention that DPW has given those streets in my district when they need help.
I guess I would also, you know, understanding how hard this is, but knowing that, you know, I do think it's in the city's best interest to at least provide sort of a formal notice. The date that the services end, I think, is an easy one that we can discuss and push out and negotiate over. But I do feel that early in 2026 to meet kind of the intent of what the attorney's office was asking us, we should at least consider providing the notice that we, in our records, acknowledge that these streets are either private or unaccepted. If you'd like to know what that is more, and maybe by the time that we are able to send those out, we will have a tentative timeline that we would be stopping our services, even if it's not October of 26.
It's certainly not something we want to send right before the holidays.
Oh gosh, no.
Further out, yeah, exactly.
I want to encourage you to reach out early in this process. And you know, I was assuming that it had been done, but I do think that we'll be able to spur people to go, what? How did this happen? And to be quite, honest, people need to see the developers of their own, streets and their houses, because that's the people that really are at the core of this. The Sunset Cliff, I had I was helping with a water issue. And it's just, this is what the finances are that are related to, the development of this area. And there is some entity that retained ownership of the street. And, I mean, getting that information early, I think, can only help everybody. And I don't think that the way you're going to get it for the most part is until you inform people, and then they start to look at it, and they're going to start by going, what? And you mean I'm going to have to find a lawyer to find this out? And the answer should be, it would seem to me, that this actually should have been in your title opinion when you bought your house. Maybe, I don't know if you go back and look at your title insurance, but that's where your information should have been in the title opinion.
And that's where I think it is hard, because, North Cove describes themselves as having a way or right of way, but it is not a public right of way, and it is not a city right of way. And so as a property owner out there seeing their title insurance, I have looked through their deeds. It's not extremely clear, and it's certainly not at a, what we consider like a 5th or an 8th grade reading level, where you want to say that the average population will actually understand what they're reading. It's not super clear. And so I can understand where some of these folks are completely unaware and say, no, I have a right of way. It's in front of my house. You need to come take care of it.
I would also say, you may find a similar situation that we found on Franklin Square. There may be some documentation out there on any of the streets that indicate that actually the street was accepted or dedicated and the process wasn't followed through on. I don't think that's the situation on most of them. There might be a couple, and then that's our responsibility to step in and take care of those things. So we're open to that documentation. It's out there.
Well, we look forward to continuing the conversation, and thanks in advance for answering some of the questions.
Yeah, can I just provide one last point of clarity?
Absolutely.
One of the reasons why we've not sent out the notices yet is that while DPW manages the right of way, we do it on the city councilor's behalf, as the city council is really the administrative body that has control over the right of way long term. So that's why this is coming through for you guys. Essentially, we're asking for permission first to send the letters.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Don't you always want to ask for forgiveness instead of permission?
Not on this one.
Yeah, okay, there you go. Depends. Yeah.
Well, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Thanks. And so we'll continue on to our next, or our previous item that we moved, which was the update on Bank and Cherry Streets.
Want to go to recycling instead?
We can.
Yeah, Julia's here for the duration, so while respecting our members' time.
Unless they want to hear about Bank and Cherry Street, we'll move on to this.
Is it related to signals? If it's related to signals, then maybe. Otherwise,
Well, we just met yesterday, didn't we?
You're welcome, and you're welcome, just so we're not craning our heads around as we
Come on up.
include you. Come on up. Okay, so instead we're turning to recycling next steps.
Right, thank you all, and thank you to ask me to lead this for being here as well. I've put together in the packet, Lee Perry is out until December 1st, so is me from management. We put together a memo here that summarizes a lot of work that collectively we have done over the last 9 months. I want to be clear that the city, the options in front of us, both ways, the city is confirming its commitment to continue running a consolidated collection service for recycling for residential properties throughout the city. The question is whether our city staff does this work or whether it is a contracted service. We need council direction to help us implement either alternative. We are in a holding pattern now, keeping positions open to keep flexibility if this gets contracted out, so that we have positions for staff from recycling for other opportunities in the city, but that leaves us a little shorthanded for the winter. The memo lays out much of our process to date, and I really won't get into the detail of it. I will hit wave tops. We did a first round of an RFPQ looking at 3 and 5 year terms for contracting out the service. We didn't get any bidders on the 3-year term, and we got one uncompetitive 5-year bid. We heard from haulers with concerns about the RFPQ limitations, too fast start time, too short of a time period to advertise equipment. So we put out a second round RFPQ. We got one competitive bid. It came in mid-November, about 10 days ago. We've shared that in the council, in the committee packet. We've put together a comparison between the sustainable city-run operation and a contracted hauler operation. And are looking forward to having that conversation with you tonight. The DPW Commission voted 6-1 to carry out the city's consolidated collection service for recycling through a contracted hauler. That said, I did not put my thumb on the scale for that one. My memo said that I wanted to get their input. I have, for your memo here, put my professional opinion in writing and have indicated that I believe that contracting out our service is in the best interest of the city for the following 3 reasons. 1, it fully protects our street maintenance team from having to do recycling because it would be out of the city staff's purview. 2, it appears to be the least costly option. And 3rd, it gives management the most option in the future to do all the priority work, programmatic and policy work that the council, commission, and administration wants us to do, because we aren't in the day-to-day operation for the next 7 years. All this said, I was very clear in my memo that the council, that DPW will support whatever the council decides is the best direction for getting the recycling collection done. Either option here can work. Each have pros and cons, and we're here to 1, answer questions, and 2, encourage you to get to a decision fast so that we can move ahead accordingly. And I would absolutely welcome hearing from our Ask Me friends here if they wanted to share any words.
Sure, feel free to add anything you'd like, and feel free to participate in the conversation.
I would just say, Colby Delaire, acting president. I would just say that everything Chapin said, I would agree with at this point. Even at full staff, which we have struggled to keep in the street department, we do not have the amount of staff day-to-day that would be required to do everything we need to do to fix potholes, put in new sidewalk, assist with the water department in a collaborative nature. Everything that the street department's doing day to day. We, through attrition, are just losing employees there. On top of that, through the recycling department, we have struggled for roughly 5 years to keep those jobs staffed. The turnover in recycling has been tremendous for years. It has really been a meat grinder to the employees that do that job. It's a great entry level job for a younger person who is looking to get into the city, and it used to be one of the few ways you could get into the street department. You know, Gene, back when you were here, way prior to me being here, you had to wait for someone to retire, pass away, something for you to get into the street department. Those were coveted jobs. There's people in this room who had to work their way up through recycling because that was the way, as a younger person, you could get here and get a great job in the city and provide for the city, and then provide for yourself and your family. We don't have that anymore. What we have now is where those jobs are just not sought after. And we've always known that for a period of 1 to 5 years, we'll keep a recycling. And then eventually they will move on, and preferably and hopefully in the city, and move on into another department somewhere else, so that we retain those quality employees, even if we don't have them in recycling. We're now not finding that, even with Chapin, correct me if I'm wrong, but a $6,000 sign-on.
Currently it's 2.
Oh, I apologize.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we're looking at
Yes.
some other things, but a $2,000 sign-on bonus. We're still not attracting the either laterals from the private sector who could walk right in, or new hires who are willing to do the job. Either one, we're not finding them. The incentive right now, there, as the councilors know, there's an incentive for the street department right-of-way technicians to do that job. And if they voluntarily go over there, to get a bump for the number of hours to their pay that they are on the recycling truck. That as well, they are starting to say, that's fine, you can keep your bonus, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing over in streets. It is having an impact. The street department is having to do the heavy lifting for the recycling department, which, you know, overall they're happy to do. The issue is it's a tedious job in and out of the truck, and we're just not finding the younger, energetic workforce to come in and fill those jobs. And so for ASME, it feels like, unfortunately, a place where we have to be pragmatic and say, we're not losing jobs. Those employees will be moved to the street department if we move in this configuration. So we're not losing any jobs. We're just transferring those jobs potentially to the private sector, if that's the direction the council wants to go. I would love to feel differently about this. I would love to add union jobs into this if I could. I think the downturn financially that we all see that we're in creates where we just don't have the funds for this. We're entertaining the idea of more than doubling the sign-on bonus. I frankly don't think that will even get us the candidates we need. I have a hard time trying to force the street department right-of-way workers to do that job, as most of them, as we've spoken about before at a previous council meeting, it feels akin to a betrayal to them that mandate that they go back out onto the recycling truck, having already been on the recycling truck and worked their way up to get off that truck. We have had employees leave because they felt that they could not get off from the recycling truck. I don't want to put that onto the private sector. I'm not trying to privatize union jobs or municipal functions. And I think we did a great thing with recycling as a city, you know, a long time ago when nobody else was doing it. I just think we're at an impasse at this point. I would love to keep the program if we were more sustainable. I'm not advocating to privatize the program and get rid of it entirely. I just find myself realistic at I cannot, as a union official, get you the candidates that the city can hire. The city can't find the candidates that the city can hire, and the union rank and file membership that is affected by this is looking for support and relief. And so that is my realistic, long-winded answer as to why I'm at the position I'm in. I would love more union jobs. I would love, with all of the health and safety, updates to the job that have the toters, the side load, everything that's happened, the city has tried to make the repetitive injury, and strain load in the job better, but it is a meat grinder. It's a hard job. And so being realistic, at this point, unless we could turn the tide and we had people for the job, I have to, as the union leader, for this work group, have to say that realistically, I think it's the direction that I would have to support. And I hate to do that, but that has to be our position at this point. Our work group is asking us for help. And that's where we're at.
Anything else to add?
Scott Phillips, local 1343 chapter chair. There was a discussion about standing it up on its own 2 feet, right? Having 3 to 4 workers, working foreman and a manager. I think that was a great idea. But again, to Mr. Delaire's point, the difficulties in finding and maintaining that staff level, just to me anyway, seems nearly impossible. And it would be a really neat way for someone like me to cap my career by going full circle back where I started in recycling. Again, I was a younger individual. It was a great opportunity for me to get my foot in the door, meet new and interesting people, perform public, service. Whatever changed, it changed. It happened. We're having a hard time staffing, so I just want to reflect on what Mr. Delaire said.
I think it'd be a great idea to stand up.
Yeah.
A manager, a working 4-person, and a staff of at least 3. You'd have to have more because someone's always sick, someone's kid's always sick, somebody needs something. And so if you have 3, you really have 1 to 2. On your best day, you have 3. The only concern is, how do you fill it? Even with that money, how do you fill those positions? I would love for that to happen, for them to have their own office, even if it was out of here. Just to have a manager who was dedicated to this so that they could answer those calls. The streets manager is tasked with that work group and, answering those calls while they're managing their crew of 16 when they're fully staffed. Because there's calls all day long. Valerie and Holly get all the calls up front. Or you didn't get my toter, it's blocking my driveway. The lid's not closed, the wheel fell off, I need another one, all those things. That would be tremendous. The issue is just getting the warm bodies to cover those positions. I really wish we were in a different place. I really wish that it would be easier for me to support more union jobs and good paying work with a rewarding job at the end of the day. I mean, you're taking away a resource that is going to get recycled and you're making someone's day better, even if they don't see it as that. The issue is just finding those people to do that work.
Well, I also feel that if the council did opt to contract this out, I would assume the city would still have a lot of customer service control, maybe even routing, some routing oversight as far as the routes go and direction of travel. We'll still have some influence on the program is what I'm trying to say. So it's not like the city would just be releasing it into the wild, hoping for the best.
That's correct. Yeah, good now, Seth. Jacob, anything to add?
Happy to answer questions.
Okay.
We've taken a lot of time, but it's important.
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah, I got no questions. I have not been shy in my position. I've been really clear, and I totally appreciate the union's position on this. I totally appreciate management's position and the difficult position. When I look at the money that we're saving, once you consider the city overhead line of $90,000, we're talking about a difference of $50,000, right? And that increase is due to hiring extra people, the extra people that we're talking about, right? And all the way that goes down the line. So in terms of like the dollars for the city and the savings of it, to me, you know, although we are trying to nickel and dime, we are in pennies when it comes to that. And in fact, you know, perhaps there is a way to even hire for the streets to sort of like change that dynamic where people are being, instead of going backwards in time, there we're filling that so that the streets division is not shortchanged by people having to go off on it. I don't know, I haven't really thought through that, but that is, you know, sort of another way of doing it, because if you're not hiring those people, then you've got money just sitting in the bank, so to speak, waiting to be. And so you're not actually spending that money, but maybe you could be spending that money just on a different line. So maybe we're looking at it in a more creative way. The fact of the matter is that when I looked at the Casella response, they are not looked in, and I would point you all to pages 11 and 12 on their proposal nuances. So they were seeking the ability to increase the price during the term of the contract if our living wage increases, if the CPI increases, if taxes or regulatory costs increase, if fuel increases. No, maybe we're not going to go with that. You know, they're asking for this to be negotiated.
Right.
But let's be really clear about it. You eliminate the city, and you are absolutely taking away the competitor for this huge, you know, with waste management probably at a national level, this huge company. Effectively, it is a monopoly here, and that's reflected in the fact that we just got them to bid, even despite hearing from all these other folks that the term's too short, that this is not right, that is not right. Okay, so we make some changes, and they still don't do it. Okay, because this is a natural monopoly. Let's be clear about it. And from my position, and it's a natural monopoly of a public good, an essential public good. It's why solid waste districts exist in the state as entities, right? Because we recognize as a state that we need to do this in a public, democratic, not-for-profit way. Casella's is in it to make money, and you eliminate our program, there's no public option, and there's not going to be a private option to compete. And then we sell the trucks, we get rid of the people, we're absolutely at the whim of a monopoly. I don't want us to be at that. And I just want to say that I heard from Casella, and it makes perfect sense. We heard it actually, Lee, before that they're having the same problems that we're having in terms of staffing, right? So, I mean, this is a big problem for our country, right? Which I can't solve right here. I'm not going to try. I can't try to do that. But it's not just the city of Burlington that is facing that. And if Casella is facing that, and we get rid of our program, dollars to donuts, they got us on a over the barrel, and we're going to be in really big trouble, both service wise and money wise. I think that this is to put it out and eliminate the program inside is a very short-sighted approach. So let me just say that. Let me just say that also, I think in our analysis of it, we undervalue the need for democratic control over this stuff. Yeah, we've got the ability to do a bit of regulation. You eliminate, they're a monopoly. So the more you regulate them, the more they say to us, we got to then increase the price, and we got nowhere to go, right? We get rid of, like I say, get rid of those trucks, get rid of the infrastructure. It's not a right thing. And you also, again, then I think we underestimate the value of us doing this on a not-for-profit basis. They're a publicly traded company. They've got stockholders that are demanding that they make money, right? And a lot of it, right? And we don't have that. So we've got a flexibility that is really important, and it's sort of that is acknowledged in the memo. I appreciate that, Chamber. And it's also underscored by their nuances section, where they talk about all the reasons that they might want to get a change during the contract term. So, you know, what they're saying is, yeah, you got a contract for 100, whatever the price is. I have to flip it up to 168 something, is a million or 100,000 or
$1,081,000.
well, 81. Oh, I thought it was like in the 160s, but okay, we're in the same. Yeah. But that's a number that is going to change. And if it's not going to change in the 7 years, which is both a very long time and a very short time, you know it's going to change once we get out of the business. So I think that, you know, the arguments that were made in the memo related to asset management and our capacity to do that in streets and water. Again, I appreciate that. I think we need to build that capacity there. Those are revenue funds. I support the union position that this be a revenue fund, a revenue department, whatever you want to call it, an enterprise department, so that it gets the staffing and the attention that it needs. I don't think that is eliminating this is the way that we should be building our capacity there. And you know, they use a lawyer term, it is a slippery slope. You can say that about anything. Say that about walk bike, say that about traffic calming. In fact, that is, I remember a long time ago, you know, under the Paquette administration, updating all of it. I mean, austerity was just the norm. That's what we did. We don't do that. It's not what we do. That's not the city that I want to live in, and that I'm working really hard to build. We need to build the capacity within those departments to do that work. And the last thing I'm going to say is on flow control, I welcome a proposal that we can either vet here or vet in the ordinance committee. I'm getting a growing docket. We are getting a growing docket. But I think that we actually are managing it in an effective and expeditious way. And I would be willing, because I think it's regardless, it's necessary. I'm willing. So the direction that I am going to be supportive of this meeting is clear. I am not in favor of privatizing this function, even knowing that we can regulate that. So, thank you.
Barrett?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to the union for coming, and I appreciate your perspective, and I believe it's a valid perspective given the recent history of this program, and the state of the market. Gene said most of the points that I were going to make. I agree with all of them. My position on this has been known. I'm not in favor of privatizing this public service. And in my thinking on this, my thinking has always and will always be on the issues of these public goods and the need for democratic control over them. It's always the long term, and what we have here in front of us is a long-term contract. I agree that despite the mandate that we have to have a competitor, if it comes to that in the future, if we could decide to get rid of our recycling service, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to have the political will is going to be there after we dismantle our infrastructure, if it comes to that. And what comes from that is a question that I ask. And when you lose the democratic control and you lose the accountability when that comes to pricing. If this when this contract expires and we don't decide to bring it back because the infrastructure and the people are gone, then we lose the accountability. The people of Burlington lose the accountability and the control over how much they are willing to and able to spend on these public services. We lose our accountability and ability as a city to not continue to exploit our workers that a private company like Casella will most certainly do when they add positions. I hear like I said before, I hear the perspective of the union, and I agree with a lot of what they said. These are things that we need that if we decide as a council to keep recycling within the city need to be pursued, and need to be pursued quickly. And I think by keeping recycling within the city, we have the ability to do that, and we have the ability to make the lives of our workers better in all the respects that the union shared today, and in our past conversations. Whether it's putting recycling into an enterprise fund early and the changes that need to be associated with that, or once again thinking long term, building the infrastructure for a fully consolidated system run by the city, if we find that to be the best option, and making the necessary additions for that. By giving away this service now, I just simply don't believe we're going to get it back, and the consequences that come with that we have seen with the privatization of other services, not just in Burlington but everywhere. It's not the direction that I want to see the city go to, and for that reason, as my position has been very clear, I will not recommend pursuing this contract. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. So I think it was a year ago when you first came to us, Colby, and told us that the problems trying to conscript the street department, people to do recycling. And it's been a year, and I think we've hired about 2 or 3 people, and we've lost some of them, and we have like 2 now. And we just haven't been able to staff the recycling, and we'll likely be in a situation where we have to, if we were to keep it in the short or the longer term, where we have to bring street people and street workers in to do the work. Is that accurate, do you think?
I would say that the street department, we went through a change where they're now called right-of-way field technicians. And so those right-of-way technicians are day-to-day at least 1, if not 2 a day, are currently on the recycling.
And
Sometimes three. We had, correct me, you're the only one from management here. Lee's not here, but we had, from the time that we were here last to now, we've had open requisitions. We now have 2 probationary employees. She's off her probation. I apologize. I misspoke. So one who just came off probation, a 3-month probation, and another one who is pretty much just starting a probation. So we have 2 full-time recyclers who you know, I can't speak for the other union members in this regard, but there has been some question about what other open jobs are there, you know, what's that process look like? So for us, just to tie up a point, because I fully appreciate everything that's been said tonight, and I think Jean made some really great points. I think the issue just for me continues to be, the union is here to support the city management wherever we can. We try and work as collaboratively as we're able to. And we, while we don't really do anything financial for the city, we're more worker rights and another set of eyes looking out for everybody in the city. We do try and help be as fiscally responsible within each of our departments as we can be. The money side for me really is not where I'm at, because I really don't control the money. That's really you guys and management. It's the worker side where, you know, we just can't supply for the workload we have. And we're having trouble filling the street right-of-way jobs along with the recycling jobs. And so that becomes hard on the dry erase board in streets we're looking at for plowing. And it's basically just writing out who's going to be in a sidewalk tractor, who's going to be in a dead end truck, who's going to be in a large plow truck. Some of those unaccepted streets, I've had the pleasure of plowing and salting, and sometimes I'll be honest with you, for those unaccepted, sometimes all you can do is salt. You can't put the plow blade down. Oh, I'll kill the truck. But I am not part of the plowing routine, but we are dipping into other departments who can't. So that ripple effect goes far and wide outside of streets. My only concern financially, and it's an outside concern because I don't really do anything with the money, is if this is stood up, which I would love if we had the money. I mean, that my position, Merrick, my position still is the same, that if we had the funds, I would love to do that. My issue is I have to look out for, in my concern, more than just the street department, more just than the 2 people in recycling. We have a finite budget. If we have to purchase more trucks, if we have to have more staff, if the sign-on bonuses have to continue and the financial incentives have to continue, that money has to go from somewhere. So then what other department do you pull it from? You end up with a real Sophie's choice of which department now, when we're moving that budget around. I mean, it's the same as in our households. You know, if you have $20 and the price of eggs goes up, where do you now skimp for the better of something else? And that's the concern for me.
Thanks. I mean, and I just wanted to bring it up because this has been ongoing now for a year, and we've thrown money at it in terms of sign-on bonuses and extra comp, and we're still struggling to fill these positions. So it should be no surprise to Jean that I'm supportive of this contract. with Casella. I wish we could do it for 5 years. But I understand that the issue for them and making it affordable for us was trying to depreciate the equipment that they have to invest in over the 5-year time frame. It makes it more economically viable for us if they have 7 years to depreciate the equipment. And I think it's important when we talk about we're privatizing recycling. We're not. What we're doing is we're contracting a city recycling, curbside recycling service to a private contractor for a period of time. And to the resident, the service will not appear any different. A truck will come weekly and pick up their city issued recycling blue bins. That's right, Chapin, right? I'm not misspeaking on that.
Right.
And it will look no different. I've even seen, we from time to time have to get a recycling truck, don't we, from somewhere else when ours are broken. And they come.
Myers.
And I would be, unless it's labeled as a Casella truck, I wonder if they'll even notice. We contract with other businesses for city needs, for legal work, and the city attorney's office for street work. Talk about a natural monopoly. SD Ireland, I think, does most of the concrete in this entire region. And we don't have an issue with that. Well, at least I don't know. And for security work. And so this isn't without precedent. And in terms of their, I'm not, obviously I'm not here to vouch for Casella, but I do have them as my own private trash hauler, and I've had them for 15 years or so. And I have to say that they're pretty darn good, service wise, and my experience with customer service as well. When they missed me a couple of times, they've come back and picked it up, and they work most of the holidays that I know, I think there's one they take off a year. The cost pressures that Casella might have, I think is legitimate, something we would have to negotiate in any contract beyond an RFP. We'd have to negotiate that and make sure that we couldn't get, we didn't have unexpected increases. And insofar as we had those pressures, or they had those pressures, I think the city would have similar pressures because they're related to labor costs. And I just think we'd also be increasing ours. I think we had to increase our collection fee recently, so
70%.
yeah. And the benefits of doing this, I guess, the contracting will address the current issue we have. It'll address the union concerns about the conscription of other workers into recycling duty. It will provide more bandwidth for the maintenance department. Something we haven't talked about tonight, but we've talked about in other meetings, is I know that Leah said that the maintenance department is often working on recycling equipment at the exclusion of other fleet equipment that needs maintenance because it breaks down so much because it's used so hard, it's stop and go, and it's grinding things up in the back and pressing them together. For whatever reason, he said that they're mechanically very needy and in the shopping line. So we wouldn't have that, and we would sort of free up potential maintenance resources for other fleet needs. And it would provide DPW bandwidth for the multitude of projects that are ongoing. And without having to figure out how to stand up, a recycling program and the efforts to hire and organize and staff that, which we know we've had problems doing. So I know there's concern on this committee and on the council generally that once we contract this, it'll never come back. And that may be the case. But if like Casella was, ungodly expensive because we couldn't keep their prices in checks, we have a more compelling argument to take it back after some number of years. We might even want to, I know that I haven't been a fan, but others on the council have been a fan of like consolidated collection. I don't think it's an either or. I think that we can this one thing that I would look to Gene as a former city attorney on is, I don't know to what extent we can obligate future councils to. Like, we can say take something up, next year, but can we say take something up in 4 years, and can we resolve as much? And if we could, then maybe we can craft some language and whatever we decide to do, if we were decide to work with Casella and have them be our contract our city recycling to Casella for some period of time, 7 years. In year 4 or year 5, perhaps, we could have this discussion about taking it back. Would it be less expensive to residents? Because I think that's the argument really of why we would want to do it, because we're trying to get the best value for city residents. So could we craft some language that would allow us to have that discussion then? And decide if it's cheaper or whether or not we're happy with the service that we're getting, or even be more expansive and to undertake a consolidated collection. It is expensive right now. I have like an organic hauler. I have Casella, and then we have the city for recycling, and all in all, it's probably $100. If you get all 3 of those services at your house, or somewhere in that range, depending on who you're using. And maybe there is a compelling argument, but we could have that discussion, once we get beyond the current troubles we're having with this service, the way it's currently operating. So, I'll end there, but I am supportive of this. I wish we were able to make more headway in the last year, but we really haven't been. And I don't think it forecloses our ability to have the conversation in the future. And I know it's a concern, and insofar it is a concern, maybe there's some kind of compromise where we could build some language into a city action that would allow us to, obligate us to have this discussion at least in the Are there other reactions, discussion points, questions from councilors?
No, I'm pretty much there. The only other thing I would say is we started talking, you've already made some changes in terms of the way you've structured street department job, if I'm hearing you right, the right of way. Trying to build a system that is not as hard, is more varied, is got avenues for advancement, so you can see your future. All of that, is something which I think is consistent. There is a level of inconsistency with it being an enterprise department on its own, but I think that can be overcome in terms of just the way that you structure it. Since it's all within the Department of Public Works, and we do through the cost sharing, whatever that word is that I said that I quoted the city overhead. We do that right now. So I would be encouraging us to do that. And I think that we have made insufficient headway in dealing with the hiring problem. We have made some. I remember, we couldn't get any but second person, right? And maybe we won't continue. Maybe this person will, but that's a big. I think that's a big step to it. Those are the only other comments that I'll make. You cannot make a future council do anything unless like a contract expires and they've got to decide what to do at the end of it. So the 7-year period, a future council can. There's nothing that we can build in, absent it being built into the contract. But again, you know, like the whole purpose of the 7 years was to allow them to amortize the capital costs that are associated with these. They don't have this. They need a longer onboarding because they don't have the people. They said that right there in that corner in our last discussion of it. They need their people with the CDLs. Maybe that's a problem for us that we should be, and maybe we have no ability to work through the CDL problem because it's a federal mandates, but maybe there are ways that we can do that. So, Castella, they're big boys and they'll be able to come up with something. But it's not reopening. It's short of the 7 years. That ain't gonna happen. So, yeah, we can have the conversation, but I've heard this conversation and it's with all due respect to you, my friend, it's fool's gold.
Well, and I guess I would say in response, and then I want to talk to the committee about how they want to go forward, and then actually I'll try to America and then we'll talk about that. But maybe it isn't, and we can't obligate a future council, but we have all manner of plans that we construct in the city, and we could have a plan that sets forth dates by which we panel committee, and whether or not a future council decides to do that or not would be their decision. But if as you predict, we get gouged and priced in a way that makes Casella unaffordable, then we would have a compelling reason to take that up, wouldn't we? So I'm just saying we could protect ourselves, and we could still get the benefit, get the relief and solve an issue we have right now. Like I said in the outset, I wish it weren't 7 years, but I understand the reason it's 7 years, just in order to make the pricing work for us. Merrick, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, be clear that again, and mostly be clear to the workers that that I truly hope and will do everything I can to make sure that that if the council decides to keep our recycling program in the city, we are not voting for the status quo. We've been talking about the problems here for a year, and if I believed it was 100% impossible, then maybe my thoughts on this plan would be different. I do believe that it is possible. I think I think work has been put into it. But I think that we need to put more work into it. And by taking even more real action and real movement of resources, whether it's in our next budget or whenever, as quickly as possible, I'd rather keep the program and create a system that works for the city, that works for our workers and works for our residents, than to hand off the system and potentially suffer the consequences that we've talked about. And I'll also just add that as a counselor, I've never gotten a complaint from a resident about our city recycling service. I have gotten complaints about Myers and Casella. So I wanted to, that's a testament to your work in the recycling, and I really appreciate it. But yes, thank you.
Thanks, Merrick. And I'd be remiss to say I did give props to Casella, but I also have not had issue with recycling. I wasn't juxtaposing. I'm just saying that a Casella future isn't necessarily one with diminished service. And so I guess at this point, I don't know if you have some comments, Chapin, or we can talk as a committee on how to proceed, because this wasn't really referred to.
That's correct.
So we don't have, so we can decide how we want to, whether we're going to keep this or what we want to, take a vote, send it back. what are folks' thoughts on it? Or did you
Some
want to?
context that would just be helpful. We have 60 days from the point that the bid came in. The bid came in on November 14th, so we have till January 14th, let's say. There's a council meeting on the 15th, and then there's a council meeting in January the 12th. Yeah. So I would like some direction, if possible, by December 15th at that council meeting, so that we're not missing most of the winter understaffed for winter maintenance. I am open to the conversation here if there was interest about studying consolidated collection in year 4. Would that be a compromise? It would buy us time if we contracted out the service to be able to take a breather and focus on consolidated collection and the feasibility of it. And lastly, I'll just say, I hear it, we could do more to try to get people in the door, but we have tiered this position. We've reconstituted this position, got it to a 14/15, one of the few tiered positions in the city. We do provide CDL training. We've offered hiring and referral bonuses. We've paid for social media ads. We're trying, and boy, it's been a year of struggle. And the amount of time we're spending here and day to day, just keeping this program limping, it's a ball and chain operationally. So one way or another, we just need y'all to make a decision and we'll make the best of the situation.
So when you say the 15th, that's when you need full council direction, I would.
I welcome that on the 15th. I know it's not on the agenda for the 1st, and that's already kind of baked.
And so you need something, some indication from us tonight, I think.
I would welcome it.
Okay. Well, with that.
Well, I'm gonna move that we recommend the city maintain the recycling program.
Second.
Yeah, and then we'll then take a vote. Is there any further discussion before we vote? Well, no, Councilor McKnight's not here tonight.
Right. I mean,
So with that, I guess no further discussion. All those in favor, indicate by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. So there you have it.
So how about you have your direction?
You have some direction.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I
that
appreciate all the time. I know this is a hard conversation, to our union friends. But, we're all trying to do the best for the city. And I think the important thing is that we all use the language that we are trying to preserve a consolidated recycling collection. How we get it done is the question. So let's carry on, see what the council says, and we will take the high road and do whatever you direct.
That's great.
Well, and thanks again for coming back and sitting through the rest of the earlier part.
And regardless, the consolidated, option is out there. We'll have the same sort of the same sort of debate, right? You'll get my support on that.
I remain open-minded if there's a compelling argument.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you guys.
You're welcome to stay.
Stop.
My wife's mad at me, I said it.
Yeah,
Not alone.
okay, yeah, I was sure we started at 4, we'd be out of here. We'd be out of here at 7. So there's no way we're gonna be super staying correct. Okay,
So I was really good at sort of just running through things without jabbering, except for this one.
Okay, so our last item on our deliberative agenda is the Bank Chariot.
Yep. So hi, Julia Saki, Public Works Engineer. Last time we were here talking to you about this project, I think it was last summer. So I'll just quickly summarize what was in the memo. Earlier this year, we got an updated construction estimate from our consultant and saw that there was a $16.6 million funding shortfall between the estimated cost and the grant funding that we have available. We had put our heads down, thought really hard about how to close this gap. We applied for another raise/build grant earlier this year and were not successful. We've been looking at options for value engineering to reduce costs, but keep the same function of everything we're putting in the street. but ultimately decided that that alone would not close the $16 million shortfall. The next option we looked at is what parts of the scope could we reduce to still protect our grant funding and use what we have been awarded and fit within the money that we do have. So our proposal as the project team is to remove or move Bank Street into a different phase of funding. So we would have more time to seek these bigger grants for full reconstruction of Bank Street while still moving forward with the money we do have for all of Cherry Street and the new blocks of Pine Street and St. Paul Street. We know that there are obviously benefits and risks associated with this decision, but ultimately this brings our funding shortfall down from 16 million to about 1.2, which we do feel confident we could use value engineering, find smaller scale grants to help cover that gap. And you know, make this project happen. It's still 7 of the 10 blocks of the original project. It also has this kind of added benefit. We've to I guess jump a little bit to the end of the memo. We met with business owners earlier this summer, talked a lot about construction impacts on downtown and different strategies for traffic control and phasing the work to have as limited impacts as possible downtown. Obviously, not doing Bank and Cherry at the same time is less impactful and will provide some relief from the amount of construction going on at the same time in the same exact part of town. So we kind of see that as a win just in terms of helping support the downtown community. We met with the mayor to discuss this earlier in October, and as city staff have kind of decided this is the direction we want to pursue. We are working on getting a grant amendment with the USDOT to remove this, but it will take several months before it's officially removed. This is the first time we're really speaking about it publicly, not a huge turnout right now, but we will obviously publicize it more as things progress with our grant amendment. However, we have been the V-Trans and FHWA recommended that we still bring Bank Street through the right of way in full design so that it's a shovel ready project, so that we are competitive for grants moving forward and can do the work as soon as we have the funding. So that is where we're at with the project. I mentioned we met with businesses earlier this year. They had a lot of good ideas for how to limit construction impacts. One that we are actively pursuing is building the new blocks of Pine and St. Paul first, so that there's more detour options when parts of Cherry eventually close. Leaving the street open one way all the time, except for isolated days and work types that need a full street width. Limiting the work area to about 400 feet at a time on one side of the road, so it's about 1 block. And reopening the street as much as possible on nights and weekends. So these things will of course make construction take a little longer, but during construction will hopefully not be as impactful to businesses there. There's lots of other coordination that we're gonna be very hands-on with, coordinating on the city end, like providing more parking opportunities in the project area with parking garages nearby, working with GMT and their bus routes, and maintaining access to the public buildings on the street, and making sure we're timing the private utility relocations in a way that makes sense, and also looking at the timing of when we're rebricking Church Street and the intersections in a way that makes sense for the businesses during their busy seasons. So yeah, I'll end there and happy to discuss.
Committee?
I'm supportive of it. I wonder what the likelihood of the Economic Progress Council not supporting us is. I mean, that's it's an identified risk. I think that perhaps if the business community is in support of the sequencing idea, that they'll get behind that because it, you know, it will improve business as opposed to not. The question I've got related to the utilities, is there any greater risk due to the construction that will be occurring if we separate these on Bank Street? You know what I'm saying? You know, like just you're doing work in the area.
On Cherry.
Well, on Cherry Street and
Connecting St. Paul and Pine.
yeah, you know, so I think that the connection with both St. Paul and Pine will mean doing some work that will impact Bank. And so I'm just looking, I see, you know, the risk of more sewer breaks, and I go, okay, how much of that is construction related or induced or, you know, like aggravated, and how much of it is just, you know, like the stuff is old. Right, like the rest of
A lot of it is that the stuff is old.
Yeah.
Chip and I were talking about this earlier. A lot of all of the utility work on Pine Street and St. Paul Street is being completed under the TIF project. So that's actually already, all the utilities on St. Paul Street connecting into Bank are complete. And they're working on finishing Pine Street now. So there will be surface, curb and paving work to tie into Bank Street for the new streets, but the underground connections are being completed under the ongoing TIF project right now.
But the sewer main and the water main that you refer to on page 2 on Bank.
That's the existing
Right.
sewer and water they have had multiple failures in the past couple of years. That still may happen. We're not really impacting that with the Cherry construction. It's more aging.
Yeah.
The likelihood of failure without active construction on it going deep, as Julie said, surface work largely is low-ish, but it's still there.
Sure. I'm supportive of this. I think you can figure out the 1.2 mil.
Yeah.
I don't think you can figure out the 16 mil, and I think we need to have this, and you don't want to lose that 15 mil. Yeah. So this is a great. I think this is a great proposal.
Yeah. Thanks,
Mayor.
I have nothing to add. I support this. What Gene said. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm also supportive. I am. I hadn't thought about what if Pepsi doesn't go along. What do you think the risk on that? Is it?
I think it's relatively small. The portion that TIF is funding is actually not as closely related to the Bank Street money. Like our TIF local match is for the congressionally directed spending grant on Cherry, nothing on Bank Street. And we are still doing some work on Bank with TIF money. So I think it's a risk that we identified, and we're gonna have to figure out how to discuss that with them, but it doesn't seem like a huge.
And then I was also wondering about the sort of intersection of our city place agreements and this work, and like, does this aging water main, I'm guessing maybe it doesn't service the city place project, or is there?
Correct, yeah, they are serviced from the new water line on St. Paul.
Okay. And so, but in terms of agreement, timing and sequencing of their work and our work, is there anything that needs to be relooked at?
Part of what we need to do is just coordinate with City Place, because they're gonna be building buildings and staging from Pine and St. Paul.
Right.
And so if our desire is to build Pine and St. Paul first to allow the most detour options possible, we need to be coordinated. They have an encumbrance on our public right of way now to be able to build their building.
Right.
So we're gonna need to coordinate with them, figure out whether they're gonna be off our right of way so that we can get in and finish up the streets.
Okay. And I like the idea of trying to, the sequencing does have the added benefit of of lessening the likelihood of the congestion and just the challenges that we saw with some of the other construction this last year. So I like that about it, even though it's too bad it costs so much more now. I would also be supportive of that, your notion of trying to complete other streets to maximize the amount of alternate routes there are through whatever construction does get done. So yeah, I think it's a good plan given the circumstance.
Great.
So do you need action from us?
We do not, I think at this point, unless it was good to hear that there's general committee support. With that, I think we're gonna proceed ahead in this direction. If you hear from any of your colleagues, feel free to talk to them about this. And if there's concern, we can talk to them directly. If the full council wants a briefing, let us know, but at this point, we're feeling pretty solid. There aren't a lot of other great options to resolve this $16 million bust. But we didn't want to keep going without updating the two.
I think it will be important to let everybody know somehow, even though we're not gonna deliberate it on council. I don't know.
Probably consent memo to the council.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Anything else on this item before we go to our last item, which is going to be our next meeting? So we're tentatively scheduled for 12/23, which is fine.
Which we were criticized for, but
It's fine by me, but I don't know about others.
it's fine by me.
I don't know what staff thinks.
It's hard.
Okay, fair enough.
I prefer to look at the earlier week.
Okay.
The 16th, in other words.
Yeah, if that could work. Staff is, wrapping things up. Some staff are gonna be out.
That makes it, I mean, I know that Becca has expressed a non-desire for back-to-backs with the council. That's because
I'd like us to pick something and then, or maybe pick a couple of things and then maybe narrow it down rather than having to go to a dual situation.
One option would be, so we have a council meeting on the 15th. We have an ordinance committee on the Thursday, the 18th, and that is at 4:30.
And I think we'll also have public safety
that day.
Yeah, so we might want to go early.
We can try to do that. I mean, I'm open to do that. I mean, perhaps even meeting in the daytime on the 19th.
Or us too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would be, I mean, I'm sure that staff would love to have a daytime meeting as opposed to a.
But with the 16th would be, you're saying 16th
No, I was
would be good because it's back to back with city council.
I was not suggesting the 16th based on what Becca was had indicated before. I could be wrong. But the 19th, the Friday, the 19th is.
We've done noon meetings before.
Is open.
We could do, would you be open to us taking the 16th and the 19th and like blocking them off and then I could check with that.
I would be open to that.
Mayor, do you have a preference?
At the moment, I have no preference.
Okay, he's gonna be on break, school break.
There's no break. You're on the city council.
That's what I'm saying. He's on school.
I'll be in Burlington that week.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Julia, is this room available on 16th?
It is an interesting question. It is booked by Tech Services currently
Oh.
for an event,
Oh,
holiday
19th,
event.
that can be moved.
So
19th is not available?
no, it can be, and we can push the.
So we're gonna be the Grinches that come in here and commandeer the room for a city meeting when they're trying to have a party?
It's fine.
It was a hold for 2 days. That one's canceled.
So are we doing the 19th?
I was wondering if we could hold both.
16th and 19th are look good in the calendars for
At noon,
16th at noon
16th at noon
and
and
19th. I'm guessing Becca's work.
We can move that.
We could move that 1 o'clock somewhere. So both 16th and 19th can be accommodated in here.
Can we grab them for now? And then I'll relinquish one
Yeah.
like in a day or two.
Great.
So right now, we have a tentative date of either the 16th or 19th of December.
Yeah.
At what time? Noon?
Noon to 2.
Noon to 2. Noon to 2. Perhaps we'll have our own holiday party.
Sure.
Thanks for your accommodation of that. It will be appreciated. I think that's something
Yeah.
like third.
Okay, and I will get an answer back to, I guess, to Chapin, since you're kind of wrong.
Yeah, you've been wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, well, and thank you for staffing us
Yes,
Sure thing.
for a long, okay.
this was a long meeting. I promised to cook dinner at 6.
So you
2 hours.
You better get over to New World before they close.
You know, I got, just as long as I can get out of the front doors,
Okay.
I'm in good shape.
With no further business and absent objection, I will adjourn us at 7:20.